Good morning. Welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of June 4th, 2024. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll,
Here.
Vice Chair Bland. Here. Commissioner Chapin, Commissioner Chen,
Here.
Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Master.
Here.
All right, good morning again, and welcome to our public hearing and public meeting of June 4th, 2024. We have a few items on the agenda today from various departments. First, we'll have a public hearing for a proposed designation, and then we will move to another proposed designation that has already had a public hearing, and we'll be having that scheduled for a vote today. And then we will be moving to our public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. And this meeting is being held in our hearing room at 1 Center Street on the 9th floor. It is also being held via Zoom for anyone who would like to participate remotely. And it is also live streamed on our YouTube channel for anyone who would like to watch the proceedings. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Research, Kate Lemos-McHale.
Thank you, Sarah. Item number 1 this morning is LP 2680, Brooklyn Edison Building, 345 Adams Street, Brooklyn, aka 372 to 392 Pearl Street, 11 to 17 Willoughby Street, Brooklyn, Block 140, Lot 7503. The item proposed for a public hearing is the proposed designation of a Renaissance Revival style commercial building designed by Mackenzie, Voorhees, and Gmelin and built in 1922 to 26 for the Brooklyn Edison Company. And presenting is Bilge Kosa.
Good morning. The Brooklyn Edison Building is a distinguished Renaissance Revival style office building designed by Mackenzie, Voorhees, and Gmelin for the Brooklyn Edison Company and built between 1922 and 1926. Highly visible from Adams Street, Columbus Park, and Fulton Streets, the monumental building is a notable landmark in the civic and commercial center of Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Edison Building is located on 345 Adams Street on the prominent corner of Willoughby, Pearl, and Adams Streets. The building holds an important place within downtown Brooklyn's civic, municipal, and commercial core, contributing both to the historic Fulton Street shopping area and the plaza bordered by the Borough Hall skyscraper historic district. It was prioritized as many of a recent survey of downtown Brooklyn, in which we identified meritorious historic resources in response to requests from advocates looking for more designations in this area. Downtown Brooklyn's existing designations include the neighborhood's significant commercial, institutional, and residential buildings shown here, including the Offerman Building, the Long Island headquarters of the New York Telephone Company, New York and New Jersey Telephone and Telegraph Building, and the First Free Congregational Church, and several others. The demand for electricity in Brooklyn increased parallel to the city's rapid growth after the completion of Brooklyn Bridge in 1883. Electric utility pioneers in Brooklyn focused on streetlights as streets were planned and constructed, and expanded service as residential neighborhoods and more industrial and commercial facilities developed. During this era, around 250 small local private power plants and 3 companies met this demand in Brooklyn. Primary among these was the Edison Electric Illuminating Company of Brooklyn. Originally headquartered at 360 Pearl Street, downtown Brooklyn, the Edison Electric Illuminating Company of Brooklyn was established in 1889 to provide electricity to the homes and businesses of Brooklyn. It was one of the Edison Electric Illuminating Companies that were franchised in cities across the nation after the success of the electrical installations by the company in Lower Manhattan. The company met the demands of the customers not only by providing new infrastructure, but also numerous patented designs for lights, signs, controls, meters, fuses, and protective components that introduced the latest technologies to the market. Shortly after its establishment, The Edison Electric Illuminating Company of Brooklyn became the leader in Brooklyn's utility market. In 1919, Brooklyn Edison Company was formally reorganized after the merger with the Kings County Electric Light and Power Company and smaller subsidiaries, and continued to be the major player in the city utility scene. By the 1920s, as the electric power was brought within the reach of the average citizen through expanded power generating capacity and consumer innovations, the use of residential and commercial electrical devices and appliances expanded. After the completion of subway lines from Manhattan by the 1920s, growth in residential development increased the demand for additional electricity capacity in Brooklyn. To answer this demand, the Brooklyn Edison Company purchased the adjacent lot where Low Theater was located to construct a new, larger building as its headquarters and commissioned Mackenzie, Voorhees, and Gmelin to design it. The green arrow here shows the original location of the Edison Electric Illuminating Company of the Brooklyn, and the red arrow shows where the current building would be built. The practice of Mackenzie, Voorhees, and Gmelin was largely active from 1910 through 1925. After Mackenzie's death in 1926, the firm continued as Voorhees, Gmelin, and Walker until 1938. The firm was renowned for its office buildings designed for leading infrastructure firms, including the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, the New York Telephone Company. In its various iterations in the 1920s, it designed numerous notable office and commercial buildings throughout the New York City, including Brooklyn Municipal Building, located in a close vicinity of Brooklyn Edison Building in Borough Hall Skyscraper Historic District, the Long Island headquarters of the New York Telephone Company and Barclay Vasey buildings with Ralph Walker, and long-distance building of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company with Cyrus L.W. Atlas, all designed as New York City individual landmarks. Located on the prominent corner of the Willoughby and Pearl Streets, the Brooklyn Edison Building was designed and constructed in two phases. The first phase took place in 1922-1923, and the building expanded northwards in 1926, doubling its footprint. Expansion also designed by Mackenzie, Voorhees, and Gmelin. Since Brooklyn's electrification period, Brooklyn Edison Company played an important role both as an electric supply provider and as a firm introducing the latest technological developments. In line with this ambition, the building was designed to be the last word in office buildings, incorporating advanced technology in lighting and telephone systems, along with rapid transit elevators. After its construction, the Brooklyn Edison Building became a notable addition to the financial and commercial center of Brooklyn. Designed in Renaissance Revival style, the building features a tripartite configuration with a rusticated stone base, brick and stone middle section, and a double setback crown, responding to the requirements of the 1916 zoning law. It is decorated with Renaissance Revival style elements, particularly focused at the street level and at its roof line, including double height arch windows with multi-light transoms, embellished ironwork, shields, festoon motifs, and coins, as well as intricately detailed terracotta cornices. The building program included office spaces, showrooms, the Edison shop, a lunchroom, and an auditorium that played a pivotal role in Brooklyn's social scene. It regularly hosted conferences, exhibitions, fashion shows, and charity fundraisers and philanthropic meetings between the 1920s and 1950s. For example, this is an ad about the Wonder House, a 10-room courthouse created in the lobby of Brooklyn Edison Building in the 1930s, to demonstrate the possibilities of electricity in a home. And these clips are only a few of hundreds posted between 1920s and 50s about the social activities organized in the building. In 1943, the Brooklyn Edison Company merged with others to form Conet, and the building continued to be used by the company until the early 1970s. The building also hosted offices of various institutions, including Long Island University and the South Brooklyn Savings and Loan Association. Originally located on the southeast corner of the block, the primary facades of the building face Pearl and Willoughby Streets. However, during the construction of the Brooklyn Civic Center and the expansion of Adams Street in the 1950s, the western half of the block was removed and the urban setting changed. Following demolition of the adjacent buildings, the ground floors of Brooklyn Edison Building's west facade became exposed. The building was adapted to the changing streetscapes by moving its main entrance to Adams Street in the mid-1960s. In 2009, commercial owners Mass Development LLC created retail spaces with new storefronts along Adams Streets that interpreted and replicated historic features on Willoughby and Pearl Street with modern materials. The new storefronts activated the street frontage facing the Civic Center and helped tie the lower floors into their urban surroundings. Despite the change to the city grid around it and changes on the lower stories of the west facade, the building retains its historic form and character. Highly visible from many vantage points, its monumentality and prominent massing incorporating highly intact Renaissance Revival style elements is further emphasized after the change in the urban fabric of downtown Brooklyn. Recently, a comprehensive restoration of the building facades was completed under the ownership of the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services. The building continues to serve as an office building with commercial activities on its first and second floors. Brooklyn Edison Company building was central to the borough's electrification and stands as a testament to the transformative impact of technological advancement in electricity production on Brooklyn's urban development. The building also played an important role as a vibrant hub for social and cultural activities in Brooklyn, drawing the community together through a variety of public events organized in it. Today, highly visible from Adams Street, Columbus Park, and Fulton Streets, the architecturally and historically significant building continues to provide a monumental backdrop to Brooklyn Civic Center with elaborate Renaissance Revival style decoration and setback massing that recall the time of its construction. Designed by one of the most prominent architectural firms in the city, the building became a hallmark in downtown Brooklyn's evolving urban setting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions before we move to public testimony? All right, we'll move on to public testimony. We have one person who signed up, Regina Meyer. I don't have his name. You want to just put him up first?
Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Commissioner and Commissioner. I'm Regina Meyer, the president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, and I'm delighted to be here this morning to speak about 345 Adams Street. On behalf of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, I want to convey that we recognize that this building is a really important resource in downtown, especially in our neighborhood, especially recognizing its history as the Brooklyn Edison Building. It comprises a really important relationship to the other municipal buildings in the area. But today I'm actually here to also let you know how vital 345 Adams is to the lifeblood of downtown Brooklyn. I think many of you know it as a city building, but what's super interesting about it is that it has a two-story private condominium along the street level. This retail condominium of the building is such an important connector, bringing an active street presence to the neighborhood. By providing a continuous retail north to the Marriott Hotel, which was really the first hotel in downtown Brooklyn a number of years ago, and to the Urban Assembly School, High School to the north, it links not just hotel visitors, office workers, and even students, supplying them actually with really important lunchtime options in our downtown. The building is also located close to the key intersection of Girolamo and Fulton Street, which is really sort of the center of downtown Brooklyn, or one of the centers of downtown Brooklyn, with really pedestrian volumes, and it's really visible and active. As you will hear later, I thought you first. The MUS organization proactively sought to re-energize the frontage of the building in order to support so many of the city policies that were put in place to redevelop downtown Brooklyn as the vibrant mixed-use neighborhood it's become. The building's frontage on Adams Street essentially was really a back door, and I think you've heard a lot of the history, and for me, the history really relates also to this train coming right off the bridge, and you know how downtown Brooklyn was just reoriented around the Brooklyn Bridge. And historically, the building really fronted Pearl Street with very little active presence on Adams. As the MUS organization sought to revitalize the ground floor after the Marriott Hotel was built, the city also took on one of the first efforts to transform an underused street into a pedestrian plaza. Today, the Willoughby Plaza, which was part of really the stub of Willoughby Street at its intersection with Adams Street, that is now, that plaza fronts the southern and western edges of 345 Adams Street. And we at the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership are the proud maintenance partner of that space, working closely with the city of New York to provide a clean, attractive seating area. And in the summertime, we program the space with lunchtime concerts and evening salsa. So I just wanted to let you know that we look forward to continuing to support this space, and really wanted you all to know how important it is to ensure that the active retail has become a really important part of this building, and make sure you take that into account in the designation.
Thank you very much. All right, and we have Jeff Kay from the MUS organization, who owns the commercial ground floor. So please come up. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much for having me. My name is Jeff Kay. I'm the Vice President of MUS Development. There's a bit of background about MUS. We've been founded in 1906 by Isaac MUS. It's a family-owned and operated full-service real estate company that's currently led by a father and son, Jason and Joshua. As one of the largest ongoing development companies in the boroughs of New York City, the company was among the country's pioneers in the development of tract housing, and is widely regarded as a major force in the development history of the greater New York City. MUS has developed more than 15 million square feet of commercial, residential, industrial, and retail space throughout the 5 boroughs. For the past decade, that experience and insight has been applied to a broader geographical area as our portfolio expanded to residential communities and retail centers throughout the East Coast. But our heart and soul still remains the downtown Brooklyn today. Building at 345 Adams Street is a 12-story building in downtown Brooklyn. The first 2 floors are owned by MUS Development, and the top 10 floors are owned by the city of New York. The building is located across from the Brooklyn Civic Center on Adams Street, which leads right to the Brooklyn Bridge and stops from Fulton Street. The historical front of the building is now actually the back of the building and faces Pearl Street. When we think about 345 Adams Street, we don't look at it as a particular building. For us, it's actually a much bigger story of economic development, revitalizing downtown Brooklyn. In the late 80s and early 90s, officials made a concerted effort to bring new businesses to the area. With the construction of Metrotech, there was also a renewed focus on the thoroughfare coming off the Brooklyn Bridge from Manhattan to Borough Hall. In 1998, after decades of planning, MUS Development worked with the city of New York to lease a vacant plot of land at 335 Adams Street and built a brand new 32-story office tower with over 1,100 parking spaces. In addition, MUS built the New York Marriott at Brooklyn Bridge, which was the borough's first full-service hotel in over 30 years. The hotel had over 30,000 square feet of conference space and began to attract conferences in downtown Brooklyn. Occupancy was over 90%, and it was one of the best performing hotels in the city. In 2006, the hotel expanded to the south by replacing an unused electrical substation owned by the city and added 288 additional rooms to the complex. In total, Brooklyn Renaissance Plaza has 856,000 square feet of office, almost 600,000 square feet of hotel, 80,000 square feet of retail and storage, and over 200,000 square feet of underground parking. Along with the Marriott at Brooklyn Bridge, our tenants include the King County DA, NYCERS, Secret Service, Department of Education, United Federation of Teachers. Although there was significant replanting and street redesign of Adams Street coming off the bridge, along with the construction of the office tower and the hotel, there still was not a continuous and welcoming entrance to Brooklyn. 345 Adams Street was an eyesore. For years, it was covered in scaffolding, and scaffolding was not up. Blank brick wall faced the street. To take fully advantage of the economic development, a connection was needed from the hotel to Fulton Street and Borough Hall. I've included in my written testimony some pictures of what 345 Adams Street looked like in the late 90s and the early 2000s. In 2008, the city entered into a unique transaction when Must Development purchased the first two floors of 345 Adams Street as a condominium unit. The city realized that it needed to transform the streetscape and to utilize the private sector to do it. Must Development bought the condo unit and agreed to relocate city personnel in the building, clear out the second floor, undergo some street vault work below the building. A similar transaction was completed a few years later at the Muni Building on Raleigh. By 2009, construction started on the facade by completely removing the brick wall and attempting to recreate the arches that existed on the side in the back of the building on Willoughby and Pearl. EPIS panels were fabricated at a shop in Riverhead, Long Island, and were installed by affixing the panels to the underlying structure with a series of clips. The arch design was done in a way so it seemed continuous throughout the building, even though it didn't exist there at the time. At the time of the transaction, the city chose not to go through landmark commission, but did work with Curtis Pearsall to ensure the replica was as accurate as possible. Today, 345 Adams Street is home to Dave's Hot Chicken, Norm's Pizza, the Juice Shop, Panera Bread, Cava, the Hannah House, and a newly opened Nice Day Chinese. Bright Horizons on the second floor was open for many years before COVID and still maintains a lease at the location. Willoughby Plaza, which is operated by the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, is an active and vibrant location for the community. Retail in New York City is an ever-changing landscape. 345 Adams is no different. Over the last decade, we've already turned over 3 different tenants. Potbelly was replaced with Dave's Hot Chicken. Hill Country Barbecue was replaced by Hill Country Chicken, and then again by the Hannah. Hill Country Chicken was then replaced with Cava. Wokie Soul Food was replaced by Nice Day Chinese, and Bright Horizons will soon be replaced as well. The change is good for the area, so the retailers stick within the neighborhood. It also comes with its challenges. Must Development is very proud of the work we've done at 345 Adams. Our goal was to enhance the streetscape, bring new life to the community, and connect Brooklyn Renaissance Plaza to the Fulton Street retail corridor and Borough Hall. The city also benefited this economic development project by utilizing city-owned property more efficiently and getting private businesses on the tax roll. Until 2009, the front facade of the building was an eyesore, plain brick facade without windows, and was not welcoming to visitors and residents entering Brooklyn. Replicating the archway on the side and the back of the building was important to maintain the character of the building and to attract tenants, but it was never an obligation or a requirement by the city to do so. This ever-challenging retail market suggests that tenants will come and go. Must Development needs as much flexibility as possible to attract and retain those tenants looking to come to downtown Brooklyn. Any further impediments or delays may scare away potential tenants. We look at this as an economic development project, and we hope that we continue to work with you to support that. Must Development requests the Landmark Preservation Commission acknowledge this history and our concerns. We request that the commission makes it clear what portions of the building may or not be of historical significance. We also request that should the Brooklyn Edison Building be designated a landmark at a future meeting, that it will look favorably on a master storefront plan that we will work to present to the commission, which acknowledges the current state of the building, historical architecture on certain facades, as well as the hard economic realities of creating a vibrant retail location in downtown.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We currently have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. As the citywide advocate for New York's architectural, historical, and cultural neighborhoods, the Historic Districts Council supports the designation of Brooklyn Edison Building at 345 Adams Street as an individual landmark. Designed by the lauded firm Mackenzie, Voorhees & Meehan, noted for such buildings as the AT&T Long Distance Building and Brooklyn Borough Hall, the Brooklyn Edison Building helps tell the story of downtown Brooklyn's illustrious commercial history. The building's Renaissance revival grandeur expresses the ambition of the borough. At the same time, the historic changes made to the building, including changes to its siting that render the Adams Street facade more highly visible, articulate Brooklyn's 20th century development. To look at this building is to watch time pass over stone. LPC identifies the building's original primary facades as those facing Pearl and Willoughby Streets, and notes that the Adams Street facade was exposed during construction of the Brooklyn Civic Center and the expansion of Adams Street in the 1950s. In the 21st century, that facade received even more attention. Storefronts were added along Adams Street in 2009, interpreting and replicating elements of the historic arched windows found on the Pearl and Willoughby facades. From every angle, this building offers a monumental embodiment of Brooklyn's history. In fact, we know there is so much history in downtown Brooklyn and so many buildings worthy of designation. We thank the LPC for acknowledging at least 4 of the buildings we recently proposed as part of RFEs prepared by the Downtown Brooklyn Coalition, one of HDC's 2024 Six to Celebrate awardees. We look forward to working with LPC on the designation of those and other buildings in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm looking through our list of attendees right now. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that we also received a letter recommending approval from Councilmember Ressler and a letter recommending approval from the Brooklyn Heights Association. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. And as was noted, we will close the hearing today, and we'll bring this back for a vote in the near future. And I want to thank everyone who participated, particularly the Muss Development Corporation. I thank you, and I know that we will continue to work together to develop the tools that you need to, and the flexibility that you'll need. And so we'll continue to have those conversations as we move forward in the process. But for now, we will move to close the hearing. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed, and we'll let you all know when we schedule the public meeting for the vote. And we'll now move to our next item.
Item number 1 on the public meeting agenda is LP 2681, the Temple Court Building, now the Beekman Hotel Atrium, 5 Beekman Street, aka 3 to 9 Beekman Street, 119 to 133 Nassau Street, and 10 Theater Alley, Manhattan, Block 90, Lot 7503. Item proposed for designation is a 9-story atrium as defined by a line established by the exterior wall of the 2nd-story gallery descending to the 1st story floor and ascending to the 9th story, and terminating in a glazed cast iron skylight, and the fixtures and interior components of this space, which may include but are not limited to the floor, wall, and ceiling surfaces, glazing, doors, and trim, cast iron staircase with stone treads from 1st to 9th story with decorative pressed metal paneling and cast iron grillwork, cast iron galleries with balustrades, decorative supporting brackets, encaustic tile flooring, pressed metal ceiling plates, and a double-leaf floor hatches, and flat and round arch door and window openings. Presenting this morning is Mary Ann Percival.
Good morning, Commissioners. The Temple Court Building, now the Beekman Hotel Atrium, is a stunning 9-story skylit interior atrium, an early and rare surviving example of a 19th century office building interior built around such a feature. Long enclosed and inaccessible to the public, it was sensitively rehabilitated to become the central feature of the Beekman Hotel in 2016. The combination of carefully restored historic elements and finely crafted plaster and millwork based on surviving examples have returned this historic space to its former glory. At the public hearing on May 14th, 2024, 5 people spoke in favor of the designation. 2 representatives of the owners supported designation, provided detail on elements within the atrium that are not historic fabric, such as the bar on the 1st floor and the door and window infill within historic openings in the galleries and emphasized the need for flexibility in making necessary changes to these elements in the future to support continued adaptive reuse of the space. Representatives of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, Historic Districts Council, and the Victorian Society New York also spoke in support of designation. No one spoke in opposition. The proposed interior landmark is a main feature of the Temple Court building, designed by Silliman and Farnsworth and built in 1881-83 for the Irish American. I'm sorry, commissioners, for trouble with the picture. The proposed interior landmark is a main feature of the Temple Court building, designed by Silliman and Farnsworth and built in 1881-83 for the Irish-American merchant banker Eugene Kelly. It is the earliest surviving fireproof tall building in New York, erected as the city recovered from the financial panic of 1873. When it opened in 1880, it included more than 200 offices, all opening onto elaborately decorated galleries that encircled a central atrium below a pyramidal skylight. Located at the corner of Beekman and Nassau Streets, the Temple Court building with its annex, designed by Farnsworth 1889-90, was designated a New York City individual landmark in 1998. In the 19th century, the interior atrium became a popular feature in arcades, hotels, libraries, exhibit halls, department stores, and office buildings, since the volume allowed for both natural lighting and an enclosed, usually grand, and often highly decorative space. The first use of the atrium in the United States was the arcade building in the Providence, Rhode Island, built in 1828 by James C. Buckland and Russell Warren. And by mid-century, its popularity had spread to New York, where it was used in the now demolished A.T. Stewart department store at Broadway and East 10th Street, designed by John Kellum. At the end of the 19th century, the full-height skylit atrium was a prominent feature of office and commercial buildings across the country, but surviving examples from the period are rare, two of which are shown here: the Brown Palace in Denver and the Bradbury Building in Los Angeles. The atrium is shown here in the center of the original portion of the Temple Court building. Rising above an entrance hall and stores to the roof, offices around it had windows and doors opening onto the atrium. The atrium includes 8 tiers of galleries surrounded by arched door and window openings, encaustic tile flooring, and a cast iron skylight. From the 3rd to the 9th story, the historic galleries feature ornamental cast iron balustrades anchored at the corners by heavy newels. Thin spindle-like balusters support the cast iron panels decorated with stylized flowers. Supporting the galleries are brackets with cutwork decoration at the corner and cast iron dragons along the side. Capping the atrium, the historic skylight features decorative cutwork ornament in the beams and delicate filigree in the panels in the upper and lower monitors. Considered a fire hazard, the atrium had been enclosed above the first story from the 1950s until the early 21st century, when the stores and partitions were removed to facilitate earlier uncompleted conversion projects. From 2013 to 2016, the historic atrium was rehabilitated as part of the conversion of the Temple Court building into the Beekman Hotel by GFI Development LLC, the architectural firm of Gerner, Kroenig, and Valkersel, and Higgins, Quaisbarth, and Partners. The upper galleries were restored, and the first story became the Beekman Hotel's bar and lounge, with its design recalling decorative elements found elsewhere in the atrium. Along the galleries, the historic arched opening of former office spaces have been maintained, along with the flat-headed openings over the hallways connecting to the annex. Surviving examples of the plasterwork, door and window enframements, and the door and window units inform the restoration, and the arrangement of doors and windows was configured to accommodate the layout of hotel rooms. The floors of the galleries were historically covered in encaustic tiles except for the double-leaf metal hatches, which allowed office tenants to hoist furniture and safes. The tiles are largely original with new tiles added where necessary to recreate the historic pattern, and bespoke carpet runners have been added. The galleries from the 3rd through the 9th story are historic. In 2016, the 2nd story gallery, except for the historic section along the south side and the double-leaf hatch on the north, was rebuilt using glass blocks set in concrete that recalled the roofs of the stores. Uniting the historic and newly constructed sections, a new balustrade was created with glass panels etched with the same pattern as found in the historic galleries above. Access to the galleries was by means of a trio of elevators and a cast iron staircase with decorative panels and grillwork. As part of the renovation, new elevator enclosures were created and decorated with the arched millwork reminiscent of that originally found in the building. The historic cast iron staircase with stone treads still encircles the central elevator shaft and contains decorative cast iron panels and grillwork. In order to maintain the atrium as an open space, an innovative fire safety system consisting of sprinklers and smoke curtains was designed specifically for the Beekman Hotel and implemented here. To safely minimize the spread of smoke, fire-rated curtains drop down to the floor of each gallery from a panel hidden behind the balustrade above, and transparent glass panels help seal gaps between the curtains at the 4 corners. At the 9th story, the curtain drops from a non-historic glass canopy over the gallery that enables them to meet naturally at the corners. The proposed landmark site consists of the volume defined by the atrium galleries from the 1st floor up to and including the skylight, including the galleries and the surrounding walls and decorative features facing into the atrium, east and west hallways connecting to the annex at the 2nd through 8th stories, and the historic cast iron staircase from the 1st through 9th stories. The Temple Court Building's unique surviving 19th century commercial atrium has been sensitively rehabilitated as the incredible centerpiece of the Beekman Hotel, with its historic elements lovingly restored and, where necessary, reproduced to recreate the space's historic ambiance. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions on this for Kate or Marianne? All right, how about thoughts? Any thoughts? I mean, I do want to just note that we did, and Marianne summarized this, we did hear from the owners who have been incredible to work with and extremely collaborative, but they did they testified in support, but did express concerns about the flexibility to move windows and doors around and change features of the bar. And the designation report draft, which has been shared with you all, has been crafted to be clear about what elements and configurations are historic and which are contemporary insertions or recreations. And that noting that in the designation report will inform the staff and the commission in the future. And as you know, we as a routinely approve changes to non-historic features at staff level, particularly when it's just swapping out matching doors and windows and locations, especially since these locations are not the historic locations anyway. And really, it's the opening that is the historic part of the door configuration. And so, I do want to just note that I really believe that our regulatory framework will allow for the flexibility that the owner has spoken to us about going forward with respect to the non-historic bar and the window and door configurations and layouts going forward. So, yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
To build on what you were just saying, it is a remarkable space. It's a beautiful space. But it's also in so many ways a space rather different from what it originally was, in that it starts a floor lower, and it is the product of a very, very large amount of recreation new material that simulates the historic material. So, I mean, they did a beautiful job. It kind of violates historic preservation principles in some ways, but I think most glaringly in that it brings the atrium down to the ground floor, but that's part of the adaptive reuse of the building, and it is essential to it. So I think that the flexibility that you talk about is totally appropriate. And I mean, if they were to want to come forward and take out the first floor and make it into retail and somehow bring the atrium floor back up to the second floor, I'd see that would be a reasonable thing to ask for. Not that I'm encouraging them to do it. What's striking about this project for me is less the wonder of the space, which is obvious to anybody who goes there, but more about how they did it technically. The technical solutions that they implemented here in order to comply with current codes. For those of us who deal with these things, we know that this was a Herculean effort. It's like you're turning something white into black. It is a very, very challenging code problem that they were able to solve with a lot of creativity, and kudos to the owners for footing the bill for what must have been a massive, massive project. It's a really wonderful landmark interior space, and it's great that the public will have access to it.
Yeah. I know. I was thinking along the same thoughts about how the Temple Court's skylighted atrium combined engineering and ingenuity and incredible workmanship, attention to detail originally, and helped make this building one of the most celebrated buildings in its time in the downtown area. But I think this adaptive use of the space and this renovation is a significant layer in the history and part of the designation story. And it also included a combination of ingenuity and creativity and engineering and incredible workmanship and craftsmanship. So I think it's a nice full circle. It's a testament to how important and critical adaptive use can be to our historic spaces. And also, it was done with historic tax credits, and that's another testament to how important those historic tax credits are to preservation. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
always have thoughts, but so I had the privilege of being an architect who wasn't chosen to do this project. So I was at the site well before it was renovated, and to say your jaw dropped when you went into that place, even then, was exaggerate. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I have been back several times now to eat and drink in that space, and let me tell you, there's no more majestic space in New York to do those two things in. So, and I think the adaptive reuse, when I think that's a good way to describe this, is inventive in extreme, but particularly I think in the fireproofing of the upper level. And I think it's a model, perhaps, of how older buildings there are not so many that have atriums, but there are some, but maybe even new buildings that might seek to look at atriums as an interesting element of a new design, how they also could be huge vertical spaces, but protected fireproof places as well. So altogether, a great new designation, I think, and the offing.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, well, then I think it would be nice to move ahead with a motion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to make the motion? I have it on paper.
All right, regarding, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate Temple Court Building, now the Beekman Hotel Atrium, to defined by a line established by the exterior walls of the second-story gallery, descending to the floor of the first story and ascending to the ninth story, terminating in a glazed cast iron skylight and the fixtures and interior components of this space, which may include but are not limited to floor, wall, ceiling surfaces, glazing, doors, and trim, cast iron staircase from first to ninth story, cast iron galleries and balustrades, decorative supporting brackets and caustic tile flooring, cast iron ceiling plates, double leaf floor hatches, flat and round arch door openings, 5 Beekman Street, aka 3 to 9 Beekman Street, 119 to 133 Nassau Street, and 10 Theater Alley. Borough of Manhattan as a city of New York City interior landmark because of its special character and special historic and aesthetic interest and value, and as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation as set forth in the designation report for LP 2681 dated June 4, 2024. I also move that the Borough of Manhattan Tax Map Block 90, Lot 7503, formerly 14, be designated as landmark site as described in the designation report and attached map illustration.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
So that is designated, and that is our 122nd interior designation. So, yay, very special places. Thank you all.
Right, we'll now move to our Preservation Department agenda, starting with public hearing item number 1, LPC 24-09233. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 146, Lot 11, 109 West Broadway in the Tribeca South Historic District. An Italianate-style store and loft building built in 1860. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs.
Good morning, Commissioners. Misha Hunter, Police Saltzman Architects. The application before you regards a master plan for painted wall signs at 109-113 West Broadway in the Tribeca South Historic District. So I'm going to present, and then two gentlemen from New Tradition, who are the applicant in this case, will also speak about the existing signs and their design criteria for the proposed signs.
As you're setting up, I'll just note for the record that Commissioner Ginsburg is recused on this item.
Somehow I can't advance. Maybe I'm doing it all right. Okay, I'll try. Okay, there we go. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so just a quick image of the proposed rendering showing the proposed signs that would be at the north and south bays. You can see them here in this rendering image. So again, just another rendered view showing a different advertising campaign. My understanding is that the proposed signage campaign of this master plan would be unified, so it would promote a single company or single advertising entity. And my understanding is that the New Tradition signage company that is represented by Ahmad and Joe is active with other types of signs elsewhere, not only New York City, but outside of New York, and that they have prior experience in hand-painted signs on buildings in historic districts. And this is another image of a sign that they have installed at Lafayette Street. Okay. So in terms of locating the existing building, we can see it here, shown at the corner of West Broadway and Reed Street, pretty much near the southwestern edge of the Tribeca South Historic District. And 109 to 113 West Broadway is a 5-story masonry and cast iron Italianate style store and loft building that was designed by an unknown architect and constructed in 1860. The Reed Street facade has a frontage of 25 feet, whereas the West Broadway facade has a frontage of 61 feet. Sandstone facing was installed above the second floor as per the designation report. We know that from the zoning map, there is a special purpose district. The existing 2 signs that are present and were present at the time of the designation are legal, non-conforming, non-accessory advertising signs. So that means that non-accessory means that they were not advertising an entity that had a commercial presence in the building, okay? So this distinction is important. And based on our understanding, the existing signs may have been installed during the Cold War era as part of the civil defense campaign that encouraged painting as a way to protect your home from nuclear annihilation. So, but what's really important is that the trade group, the American Coatings Association, the lobby group that was part of the campaign for these signs, still exists, and they still are encouraging people to buy paint from manufacturers that are still part of that lobby group today. Okay, so we have that. So we did a little bit of research in terms of looking at examples of painted signs, all kinds of signs in Tribeca. And we certainly found a lot of examples of those. So this image from the late 19th century shows a really just almost like cacophony of signs everywhere and really just vying for your attention. Signs on every floor, signs on all sides of buildings. So just really a plethora of signs. Another thing that we found is that the intersection of West Broadway and Reed Street was historically a really important venue for signs. So this seemed to have been a very important intersection for signs. You can see this particular building on Reed Street that was advertising a Dutch cocoa brand, and there's a Greek term called horror vacui, which means fear of empty space. And it almost looks like they were trying to make sure that every available surface was covered with signs to advertise this hot cocoa. So there's a lot of examples that I found doing some research. But one of the most interesting things that I found was that there was a pattern of painted signs on corner buildings on the West Broadway facade of corner buildings in the Tribeca neighborhood. So on the far left is 109 to 113 West Broadway. Here we see another example a little bit further north on West Broadway, and yet another example here. So these are multi-story, monumental, like at least 3- and 4-story signs where the signage activity doesn't occur on the side street of the corner building, but it faces this major thoroughfare of West Broadway. And you can see both graphics and font text in these examples. And then we also have just more examples of signs, particularly at this intersection of Reed Street and West Broadway. One of the things that was uncovered, the LPC research staff really just did an amazing job, and they found that in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, there had been a paint, paper, paste, push outdoor signage campaign. So similar to what was advertised here in New York, but you can see that this is now part of a broader effort. And so the image on the left is a newspaper clipping that was speaking about a sign. We don't have an image of it at this time, but there certainly had been a large sign that they put on the side of their building. And the company, Ramsey and Company, were apparently promoters of publicity. So they were eager for people to come to them so that they would be able to sell your product, help you sell your product. And then on the right, we have a few clippings that relate to Mr. Oscar J. Good. I had never heard of Mr. Oscar J. Good before this this research effort. And my understanding is that Mr. Good was an advertising magnate. He was one of the significant pioneers in bringing electrified and illuminated signage to Times Square. So the Times Square that we know today may not have existed in the form that we know it without the interventions of Mr. Good. And Mr. Good previously had offices at 109 to 113 West Broadway based on an 1895-96 directory for New York City. And we can see some litigation that his family was involved with, but there are specific mentions of him. Okay, so just, I don't want to dwell too much on the history, but we do see in Avery Library at Columbia had some wonderful examples documenting the paint up, clean up campaigns, both of post-World War I and then also during the Cold War era. So in the post-World War I example, it was really after the war, okay, all of these veterans are coming back. Okay, we were really focused on the war effort, and now we really want help people to encourage them to clean up and paint up their homes. During the Cold War, the idea was if you painted your home, there was going to be a better chance of your home surviving a nuclear blast. And there was actually a video, a film that was made called The House in the Middle. And there was a test site out in, I think it's in Nevada, where they tested nuclear bombs, and they built these 3 little model houses. And if you watch the video, you can see that the house that was kept clean and painted survived. Okay. So another thing that we wanted to walk you through was based on the photo documentation chronology that we have of this building. And the earliest photo documentation that we have for 109 to 113 West Broadway is from 1914. But one of the things that we did is magnified this image to about 400%, just to try to see if there was any way of seeing any evidence of signs in these 2 panels. And to be honest, I felt like there might be a hint, but it's not definitive. We definitely see these signs here in the 1914 photo. So we're definitely seeing either they were wood paneled signs or they may have been canvas signs with paint applied, stretched out onto some kind of a frame. So that you can definitely see in this horizontal condition. We also see some signs here, but in terms of where the panel signs are that we see presently, both in this north and the south panels, it's difficult to tell definitively if they were there or not. We see the 1939 photo from the tax collection, and there we also do not definitively see painted signs. However, there was a 1975 image, and there you see at least the north panel. So sometime between 1939 and 1975, no question about it, the painted sign, at least at the north panel, was there. And then we have a 1996 image. You can also see the painted signs that exist, obviously from, 1986, 1992, the time of designation, we see the signs, and then the current image today. Okay. So again, just trying to blow up the view of the north and the south panels. It looked like maybe possibly there was some ghosting of lettering at the north bay, and maybe possibly could there be a part of a paintbrush? I'm not sure. But again, we did try to see if there was any way of examining that photo documentation to give more evidence in support of the possibility that there could have been those early signs from that we see today that were then painted over and re-exposed. We just don't know for sure. So in terms of the existing signs, we actually asked somebody who is more of a sign lettering expert, and they looked carefully at font specimen books that they had in their collection. And they said that it's possible that the font style that you see, right, brush up business with paint, paste, paper, push, may have dated from the 20s to the 40s. But the 3D effect that you see in the signs suggests that they may have been later, so 1940s or 50s. And then another thing that we looked at was the etymology and definition of the word push, particularly in a marketing aspect, because not everybody uses the word push in their everyday language. But push really means to sell. And based on the Oxford English Dictionary, it looks like the earliest application of the word push in a marketing sense was from 1872. And it's a strategy where a firm attempts to push its products to consumers. And that's exactly what the American Coatings Association was trying to do, and still exists today and is trying. So another thing that we did was looked at examples of commission approval, commission level approval for painted wall signs elsewhere, particularly downtown, so Soho and the Tribeca districts. And we found a number of examples. And most importantly, I think there was a lot of concentration of these wall painted signs on the really big arteries or thoroughfares of West Broadway and Canal Street. So not so surprising. There's a lot of foot traffic. There's a lot of vehicular traffic along these corridors. So there's a lot of opportunity for visibility. And another thing that we identified were 3 examples of commission action regarding painted signs, both graphic both font or text-based as well as graphic representation on principal facades of buildings in historic districts. So the far left example is the Capital One Bank in Greenwich Village. We also found this example for the Sephora in the Gansevoort Market District. And most recently on the 107 Spring Street in Soho. And my understanding is the commission gave approval contingent to modifications that would be worked out with the staff. And then I'm going to turn over to Joe and Ahmad, to Ahmad from New Tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. Ahmad Sayar, Atlas Media. Pleasure being with you all here today. We'll jump right into the current signage. And we walked through some of these sample images before. And so just to recap, this signage consists of 2 panels that will represent a single unified advertising campaign sitting within a C6-2A zoning district. And as a reminder, both have been designated and approved ZRD1 status from the DOB. So each individual sign is sized at roughly 11 feet by 24 feet high, measuring approximately 287 square feet each, which comprises about 28%, 27.9 to be exact, of the total coverage of the facade. They will be unified at the bottom with a vendor tag, coming at us at roughly the dimensions of 18 by 96 inches. And I believe that concludes the presentation. I know, Stuart, you wanted to say some words? No? Yeah, sure.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Stuart Beckerman from the Law Office of Hershon, Singer and Epstein, and I'm counsel to the applicant. I just wanted to comment on the community board recommendation. The community board recommended two things. One, that the existing sign be preserved, and two, that instead that they would consider a banner sign so that the existing sign would be preserved. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about that. One is, as Misha pointed out, the existing sign meets the definition of a legal, non-conforming advertising sign. And what that means is that the Buildings Department determined that it remains an active sign and that it promotes a product on the market, and the advertiser, in this case, the American Coatings Association, still exists, and the sign is visible. And so once that determination is made, at least under zoning, there is a right to change copy at that and this addresses the second recommendation, and that is that the commission should consider a banner sign. The problem is the zoning has changed. When these signs were up, the zoning allowed exactly what's there now. And so that is the sum total of what is permitted in terms of the height and size and location of the sign. So the commission, at least under zoning, can't allow an advertising sign in another location. And I just want to emphasize one other point, that I think Misha did a fabulous job making a case for the appropriateness of a sign given the history of the sign. So I think that, I don't need to tell the commission how to do its job, but I could just say that, I've had a similar case years ago. I think it was 60 grand where the same issue came up. There was a Coca-Cola sign that was visible and people were pushing for the preservation of that sign. But the commission, at the advice of council, just understood that there are limits to what the commission can do in that regard. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? All right, let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room? And I'll note there's no one in the room to testify on this item, so I'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Christina Conroy from the VSNY. Christina Conroy, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society could support the creation of a master plan for signage at this building, which conformed to the style of the historic wall signs traditionally found in industrial areas. As noted in Section 2 through 13 of the rules, historic wall signs typically had borders and were primarily text. The rules state that illustrations were common, but the many historic photos the applicants have provided show that the illustrations were essentially drawings. They did not mimic photographs. This is a type of signage we could support on this primary facade. What the Victorian Society does not support is a proposal for the signage master plan that would allow photorealistic signs, the speciality of this applicant, New Tradition, on the west face of this building. We believe that the location for the proposed photorealistic signs on a primary facade is especially problematic. Wall signs in commercial and industrial neighborhoods were typically seen on secondary facades. The applicant has provided photographs of 4 of their installations, and 3 of them are, in fact, on secondary facades. The 4th photograph shows some of their signs in Times Square, but we don't believe that signs in Times Square should be used as a model for signs in historic districts. Finally, we aren't persuaded that the fact that New Tradition uses an historic method to create the signs, hand painting, mitigates the effect that their photorealistic style will have on this building in the district. Few people will see the painters on their scaffolding, but thousands will go by every week seeing completed signs which have no stylistic connections to this building. We ask that this proposal be modified to eliminate the use of photorealistic signs. The Commission's statement in response to previous testimony that it is, quote, too difficult, unquote, to regulate the graphic style of wall signs strikes us as disparaging the skills of the talented preservations on the Commission's staff. We are confident they could devise a means of differentiating among graphic styles, but if that is not to happen, then we oppose this application. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hand raised in the attendees list, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends denial of the painting over these two classic beloved Tribeca Historic District signs. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the testimony? And I think, you've already addressed the community board concerns, but the other testimony we heard was support for a master plan here if the photorealistic style was eliminated from the catalog of painted wall sign types. And so if you want to speak to photorealism versus painterly or illustrative painting techniques or how they existed historically.
Not necessarily prepared to comment to that just yet. I do know that the LPC has tried to stay away from those types of decisions, although the commissioner's comments made sense. I'd like to regroup and potentially come back to you all with a more digestible response.
Okay. All right. So I think we still will comment though today. I think we'll have a comment putting aside the type of painted sign. I think we'll still have our discussion. And then, we'll see where that takes us. All right. So let's close the hearing. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. So this is an interesting application. We have, as you know, a long history of developing a policy and then codifying it into rules for staff level approval for painted wall signs on undeveloped secondary facades of buildings, as that followed the tradition of historic painted signs on lot line walls. This application is before us because it is for a primary facade and therefore doesn't fit within the recent rules that we approved and codified. So we are looking at painted wall signs on a primary facade of a building that we saw in the presentation historically had signs dating back to sometime between 1939 and 1975. And the applicant also did show 3 examples where the commission has approved painted wall signs on street-facing facades of corner buildings. Those were smaller buildings, and I think while rare, there are those 3 examples. And you'll note the most recent one at 107 Spring Street, we did ask that the applicants reduce the size of those signs on and limit them to the ground floor. So that was the approach taken there. So in this, and then the other thing that the applicant referred to was the commission's in the past not considering historic or ghost signs to be significant historic features. that an owner must be compelled to keep. So we won't be talking about the existing signs. We'll be discussing the proposed signs and their appropriateness on this primary facade, and can consider all of the information that was shown in the presentation about the history of signs here. So with that, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, as you know, I'm generally very much in support of painted wall signs because I think they, reflect history and also add a certain panache to certain districts. But I am generally not in favor of front facades, wall signs. And the ones that are proposed here, I think they have a lot of drama. They call a lot of attention to themselves, and I think they do really diminish the historic facade. Before the testimony, I was actually thinking about one thing that I suppose I could feel comfortable with is something that really blended in as the original wall signs seem to do. Or like sepia or bigger color, and also of a sort of distressed quality that looked like it belonged there as it did at one point in time. Apparently, originally, as far as I don't know, I'm not convinced there was something there originally, but later on, close to 100 years, there was something there probably. So. But we don't usually regulate colors, so we couldn't do a master plan because then that's what you would see. But I don't know, I guess someone could propose something for a few years with a certain color palette or not photorealistic as was suggested, that really had a quality that seemed appropriate. But I don't think this is appropriate, and I couldn't approve a master plan for something that would have, it's just too dramatic and attention-giving for a front facade, I think, and too large. So I'm not comfortable with this as presented.
Right. And I think, it's interesting, one could think also about if thinking about applying different criteria than we do for undeveloped side facades, lot line facades. One could also think about whether a master plan is appropriate or a single time we want to sort of see how it works out. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
I'm usually a big fan of these. I think that they speak to a time in the city when signage and text were part of the visual environment in a very significant, noticeable way. On the other hand, the instances of there being signage on front facades is less common, although not by any means uncommon, than on side or rear secondary facades. This building seems to have had signage on it for a very long time. And I think in some ways the building lends itself to it by the virtue of the extensive blank walls and it being a corner building. And an example was shown of a corner building where the less fenestrated facade, let's say, had signage on it. Yet it's a gorgeous building and would be very nice if it didn't have it. I think for me, I could live with the signs. I think if they were to do them, they should be shorter. I think regulating the content or style is something that we've tried and failed with. I think that in this case, especially, something that did not approach the height of the brackets and that had a border around it that helped define the architecture would be acceptable to me. My guess is I will be in the minority.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
My apologies, I was in the other room undergoing ethics training.
Vice Chair Bland.
You won't be in the minority. I will be. I have expressed ambivalence about signage from day one of sitting around this table. It's always brought to us these great photographs of the past full of signs. We just saw an incredible photograph full of signs. But we also see things in those old photographs like overhead wires that you can hardly see the sky, horses, buggies, stuff in the street that are caused by the horses and the buggies. Lots of things we don't need to bring back or want back in our city. And so I just have a different approach, I think. I'm not a nostalgic person remembering these signs and think they should all be covering all these buildings. So maybe it's the architect in me. I look at the building and I say, is a sign destroying my ability to appreciate the architecture of the building, which I view as supreme? And if it does, or if other aspects of a building, a rooftop addition, is destroying my ability to appreciate the essence of the architecture, I oppose it. I look at this and I think, where's the building? Is there a building there? I'm not sure. To me, this is a disgrace and completely annihilates the whole idea of what this building is about, or even the district. So I hope I haven't been too extreme in my comments, but I felt the need to finally just say what I feel about these signs. Sometimes they are appropriate. I've often voted for them, but in this case, I think this is like the most extreme case I've seen in all my years at the commission, and I certainly couldn't approve anything like this.
Thank you. Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. One thing I find interesting is that, you look at this building and they said that the sign covers like 27.9%, which is slightly above 25%. But when you do look at the building, for whatever reason, the signs seem like they cover significantly more than a quarter of the building. But that said, given that you have had historic signs on the building for a long time, and I think you have it right now, faded as it may be, I think that for me, I think you can put a sign here, but I think a sign that doesn't overwhelm the building. So perhaps we adjust the size, and I don't know to what extent, but I would support a sign, I guess a pair of signs here.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I had a difficult time with this one. One thing, it's a beautiful facade without the signs. And with the signs, it becomes, the signs fit in so well, it changes the facade each time. And that was the problem. Then I started to look at the signage that we have approved. And each one was a kind of a separate element pasted onto it. It did not blend in. This one has a tendency to become the facade. Now, then I look at the history of this and I say, okay, shall I disapprove it because of that? And there was some confusion in it. Put that aside. I went back to the idea of realism versus abstraction. I don't think we can say abstract or realistic signs. No, it's fine. If we get real sign, realism or abstraction is fine. In terms of this particular one, I'm still ambivalent because I'm not sure I can turn it down. I'm not sure that I have enough reason because it fits into the facade. And each time they put a new sign, it becomes a different facade. So I'm on the fence on this one.
All right. Okay. So I think where we are is we don't have enough to vote on it today. We won't take an action. That can give you a little more time also to think about your response. But aside from the type of paint or the style of paint, we did hear some some commissioners comment that they could support a sign if the sign didn't overwhelm the signs didn't overwhelm the building. And so I think what you can think about is size, relationship to architectural features, and maybe thinking about the style of the paint, and some of the other criteria that you might want to apply to a proposed master plan that would help the signs to read as, sort of accretions that don't overwhelm or detract or subsume the building. So we won't take an action, and we'll give you an opportunity to think about that some more. All right, thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Right, next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 24-07729, an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1, Lot 111. This is Governor's Island Building 140 in the Governor's Island Historic District, a Romanesque Revival style storehouse / arsenal building built in 1875 and altered in 1938. The application is to modify entrances, install a barrier-free access lift, signage, and rooftop mechanical equipment, alter the site, and establish a master plan governing temporary site installations.
Okay, I'm Isaiah King from Shop Architects, and on behalf of the Trust for Governor's Island and our client ABC&E, we are pleased to present to the Commission an adaptive reuse of Building 140 on Governor's Island. As part of a RFP that was issued by the Trust, the building is being converted into a restaurant and event space. They'll provide new full-service dining options for the island, as well as new publicly accessible event spaces, a bar and cafe that'll be open year-round, as well as reimagining a currently beloved institution on the island, Taco Vista, which is an outside exterior food vendor on the island, which is open seasonally. Oh, there we go, sorry. As an overview of the site, the existing building today, 140, is situated on Carter Road and Ferry Point Road, adjacent to the Manhattan Ferry. Here you can see the building in its future configuration, with restaurant and event space in the center and a cafe bar on the east side. Also part of this designation within the historic district is the surrounding landscape of approximately ½ an acre, which we'll go through. It's connected to the building and also the Taco Vista site. Adjacent to the site is existing parking, and then sort of a raised planted area behind the site. Quickly going through existing conditions, the site has a prominent location within the district, directly on the harbor, adjacent to the ferry landing. Governor's Island's historic and storied past as a military fort is very much tied to our project. The character of the district itself today is anchored by Fort J, as well as Castle Williams, and has a varied character throughout, with a lot of historic and high quality buildings in the district. Our site specifically is directly next to the Manhattan Ferry, near these sort of industrial gantries that were placed there. Also fronting the waterfront next door is Island Oyster, QC Spa, which I believe you recently have looked at as a commission, Fort J behind. Building 140 itself prominently located there, and Taco Vista, the current installation, is on the east side. A plan of the existing, so that's the current interior, which will be removed, which we'll go through when that was built out, as well as the current Taco Vista installation, with parking areas and kind of wood deck areas that were inherited from a previous era. The building itself was built in 1875. It's a Romanesque Revival style, and it was modified repeatedly throughout history, built by the Army originally just after the Civil War. You can see in that photo, as well as these photos from 1983, which are the oldest photos we were able to find of the building, that it's undergone significant modifications. The entries on the east and west side at one point were fully filled in with an additional crest and a new entryway added at that time. On the eastern side, there were additional stairs added, canopies added, mechanical exterior equipment, etc. Part of those photos, so it's part of the recent history. The timeline of the building, it began as a storehouse for the Army in 1875, was adapted to a warehouse in the 1920s. 1940s became an equipment storage area, A full porch on the north side was removed at that time. We have no photos or drawings or record of that structure. In the 1950s, it was again renovated with a cellar added and an elevated slab added to the building, which is when those stairs were added on the eastern elevation. And also the windows we believed were replaced at that time. It was turned into a guard post and then a bank and then a support center into its current use today, which is for offices and security functions for the Park Service and Trust. Existing photos of the building. So this is coming off the ferry. You can see, the existing conditions of the building are in need of repair, which we'll go through. As we circle around the building, this is the most prominent facade of the structure on the western side with the sort of large-scale entries and gilded crests and painted entablature, which is made of corbelled brick. As we go around, it's currently used for sort of parking and drive lane for ferry loading on Carter Road. A view from the south side, from the elevated area along Carter Road. This is the west side in obvious disrepair with railings kind of coming down. Those vents, we believe, were added in one of the renovation periods. And then coming across the north side, where there's a porch that sort of projects to the north. So there's existing conditions. Also, this is the existing approved temporary activation for Taco Vista, which currently is in a parking lot space with added boardwalk. We're looking to significantly improve this on the exterior of the project. And some of the shade structures that are there today. In terms of the facade, there's need of replacement and repointing of certain brick elements, repainting of entablature to match the existing yellow color, some structural repair that needs to be done to the brickwork, and general cleaning and replacement of existing gutters, copper gutters in kind to match the existing on the exterior. This is a shot of the interior, which is not part of the landmark, but does show these amazing historic original timber trusses that we'll be preserving and the scale of those entries, and also that elevated slab that was added in the 50s. That's an inherited condition of the project. Okay, updates to the historic character. So these are staff level updates we'll be making in summary. So brickwork exterior repairs, replacing repair bricks that are damaged, mortar joints cleaning, stone windowsill replacements for deteriorated areas that need to be replaced, repainting rafters, soffits, and entablature to match existing color with vapor permeable paint, and also repairing water table brownstone elements at various locations. We've worked through these items with our historic preservation consultant, J.H. McCorney, and have also reviewed some of these items with SHPO and have a letter of no effect already from them, and are also pursuing historic tax credits with some of these items. Windows and doors will be replaced to match the existing windows in kind, and we are working through that now. Caulking, reflashing, basement windows that were added during the renovation will be removed for flood reasons. We're replacing doors, downspouts, revising some ramps for code issues where existing, adding temporary flood barriers and ADA push buttons, which are all code related items, again, staff related. What we're here to request from you all today are these items. There's a new louver intake that we're proposing for supporting the new programs and mechanical systems. An ADA chairlift, which is a code requirement on the eastern side where there's a stair entry in one of our primary entries. A new entry door along Carter Road, which we'll review the reason for that. Signage for the new business on the Carter Road and eastern elevations. Some duct penetrations for new mechanical systems. And then seasonal and temporary, semi-permanent temporary activations on the exterior for Taco Vista and for pedestrian comfort. So to give some context, a quick design overview. The building itself, once we remove the interior structures, is sort of a historic show with this elevated slab. We are adding in a 1,000-foot space for TGI for the security services for the National Park System, which will remain on the western side with a dedicated entry in view of the ferry. The main design element is an insertion of volumes to contain bathrooms and stairs and back of house functions and to mitigate the raised slab space and connect it to event and cafe spaces, which are here. We're respecting the symmetry of the building and keeping the primary access through the space along the east-west, but also in our proposed additional entry to the event space, because we've lost the western entry to the TGI space, keeping that on access to the front porch and directly connected out to the waterfront, which is the most sympathetic location for the building in an existing window location. This is a conceptual rendering entering that new entry off of Carter Road. So you can see that we're opening up and preserving the trusses to view, which today are hidden largely behind gypsum, to a new entry and exit to the waterfront directly on access to that new entry. Another interior view of that future event space with the trusses and some exposed brick on the interior. And then an axial view up to the cafe bar through that split level slab area, really keeping the symmetry of the space intact. So just as context for why we're requesting these exterior modifications. From there, the building spills out onto the front to an accessible front yard with ramps down to a ceremony terrace and ramps up to an upper cafe terrace that mitigates grade. And then out to Taco Vista, which is really sort of separated as a partie from the building by that open ceremony space in the middle with significant new plantings and shade structures and improved containerized restaurant functions. So going through requests one by one. Our first request is to convert a half-round window at the western entry into an air intake louver, so to reduce the number of ducts on the roof. This is the current elevation, and we're proposing to maintain the existing shape and mullion spacing, but infill that upper area, which will have a mechanical attic behind it, so it'll need to be opaque anyway, with a air intake louver to support the systems to heat and cool the building. That's item number one. Item number two is a modified stair and landing on the eastern side. So this already has that raised stair area, which we need to make accessible. This is it currently today. So we are simply rebuilding it and expanding it on the southern portion of that stair to create an accessible landing point and adding in an ADA lift. We selected a lift which is primarily glass and in a sort of a darker color to not compete with the white color of the windows, and hopefully create as much transparency through it as possible. But that lives there, and this is a code requirement for the building. The third request is a modified window opening a new door on Carter Road. So this is the existing Carter Road elevation. You see that central bay with the vent is actually a wider bay already. So sort of a natural place for something slightly different. Our proposal is to keep the same historic cadence and character of the windows and mutton spacing and bring that datum across to create a door which is in keeping with the existing building character. Here you can also see some duct penetrations that we're proposing on the south side, which is, in our view, not the primary side of the building, which faces the north and the waterfront. We have some 3D images of those in a later slide. So this is a close-up of what's there today, and we would be keeping the exact same opening, cutting out the lower portion of brick to add a door and a small curbed ramped ADA entry to that door. Which would match the existing curbs that are already on site. This is where you can also see some signage that we'll go through shortly. Here we are. So number 4 is signage request. So we're requesting signage on the event and restaurant entry on Carter, as well as the eastern facade. And looking at signage that's already present on the island for QC Spa, as well as what's on the building today that was done as part of the island revamp package that was done by Pentagram. We're taking cues from that and proposing a code compliant minimal signage, one that's posted off the brick, which would be painted galvanized, as well as a blade sign that sort of takes the shape of the windows as its cue and is projected from this entry. Request 5, exhaust duct penetrations on the southern roof. So again, these are for exhaust for the future kitchen installation, as well as intake, fresh air intake for the kitchen. So we have exhaust ducts for the primary space pushed back as far as possible from the western side. And then we have exhaust and intake ducts for the kitchen space below further down. So this is a view roughly from Carter Road. A view a little bit further up, elevated of that future roof. The existing roof will be left in place. These will just be added penetrations. And then from the north, none of that would really be visible, which is the primary facade as you exit the ferry and from the waterfront. And for information, this is the northern side. We're not proposing any commission level elements here. Those 3 windows are being removed that were punched into the cellar level for flood reasons. And the grade is being mitigated also for accessibility reasons on this level. Otherwise untouched and repaired. Request 6 are exterior seasonal shading elements. So it gets quite hot in the summer for food service. And as this event space spills out to the waterfront, we're creating this sort of terraced front yard for better improved access to the water for the guests of the event space and restaurant, and proposing 2 shade structures on the front, a tent space over the ceremony space. And these would be event-based depending on weather. They may be left up, for a few events in a row, but would be taken down in between events generally. This is a proposed view of that front porch area. Today, it's sort of a muddy grass area, the sidewalk. We're proposing to set up a terrace so you can kind of get down to the water. The front porch, its element there itself, that northern projection area will be sort of exposed. And you can see the shading there in the background over the new seating and outdoor bar area, which is retractable shading. So could be opened. This is a view underneath of that. We're proposing a white structure and then a sort of a light colored fabric, which should, it's a motorized thing, so it could be open and closed depending on the weather. This is a view again from looking at that and the landscape elements. The ceremony space in the middle. So the elements you just saw are on the right side of this image. On the left side of the image, you can see the Taco Vista installation. There's significant plantings being added, sort of buffer these 2 things from each other as a sort of intermediate space between the building and the Taco Vista installation. So looking at the Taco Vista installation, it's again containerized. These containers will be newly painted and clad, and we'll show some images of that with a shading structure and new plantings and outdoor seating. So this is a view from Carter Road. We're proposing a planter buffer from the containers and for them to be clad in cedar with an entry for Taco Vista that's not shared with Building 140, but has its own sort of entry point. And then the shading element being proposed is a shading canopy product, roughly 5 by 5 inch posts with retractable mechanical fabric shading. And that's kept at the height of the containers, sort of a low profile element. We're proposing a yellow color for that, so it's sort of sympathetic with the building and tablature color already established, and not introducing another color palette to the area. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Page, flood protection. Are you raising the floor slab inside the building?
Right. So we're actually modifying the floor elevation slightly down to hit existing grades for accessibility reasons. So there is a flood. We're in a flood zone, as you're aware. The design flood elevation is at 13 feet. So we really can't raise the slab without some significant ramping on the exterior. So what we're doing is finding kind of a happy spot for all of the ADA entries. And we have about a 1 foot or 1.5 foot flood barrier that's required at the entries to protect it, except for the raised entry of the raised slab. That's right.
So you raise it.
No, we're actually modifying the slab down by about 6 inches to hit the existing grades of the road, which we can't modify, the existing ramps, which we can't modify for accessibility reasons. So for code, all the entries need to be ADA accessible. And if we raised everything to the DFE, we wouldn't really be able to achieve that and renovate the building.
help me out. Could you
Yeah.
go to the diagram? that you
Sure.
made?
Is the appendix in this? It is. Okay. I have a diagram for the flood, just a moment. These are
It's
some,
the,
here we
it's
go.
called flood
Right, so
protection.
the flood zone cuts through the building. Zone X is on the south side, Zone AE on the north side. Again, the design flood elevation is at 13. So these zones in red would be temporary flood barriers, which would be only deployed in the event of a storm. And the only impact of the building would be sort of small snake acres on the brick, which I think have been approved in the past. But without having these, we really can't make the project functional, given the existing slab elevations that exist in the project and the existing grade outside. So it's kind of, we're sort of threading the needle between accessibility, which is required, and the flood protections.
So those exterior walls are 2 feet higher?
They're about 1.5 feet. They'll be 1.5 feet high
Foot and a half.
to hit compliance.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
and they are only deployed in the event of in a flood event. And so the fasteners for them are attached to the building, and that is eligible for a staff level approval. And then when a flood comes, they put the barriers onto those attachments. Okay, yes, Commissioner
Sorry.
Ginsburg.
So I have a few questions, but following up on Commissioner Jefferson's, is the rest of the building being dry flood proofed, or how are you dealing with floods where you're not putting up the barriers?
Correct. We're dry flood proofing the rest of the building. And once the barriers are erected, it's our understanding that that provides flood compliance for those areas.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. How are you dry flood proofing?
The below grade portions?
Yeah.
They're all concrete slab as they are today. The flood barriers provide that protection from what we understand from a code point of view.
Other question, the shade structures
Mhm.
on the main building,
That
adjacent
is-
to the main building. And I see you do have drawings, which was going to be another part of my
Sure,
question.
we can stay on
The
this.
frame is permanent?
The frames will likely be welded steel, powder coated steel. They get clipped into place. I have a footing detail here of this product that we're looking at. They're bolted into place, so they can be removed from the footings. But they're not going to be coming down, up and down, right? The frames themselves will likely be, they're more or less semi-permanent. The canopies themselves can be open and closed.
And they're not attached to the building.
Correct, they're not touching.
All right, other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Bland.
The penetrations of the roof, seem to be a problem for me at least. On the, yeah, on the
Getting
other
there,
side,
sorry. There you go.
that side.
Yeah.
Could those be eliminated by, yes, additional louvers at other openings, the way you've done at the one on the left side?
We did look at having additional louvers filling in windows. There's a loss of space, obviously, with stuff starting in the attic. But I think I cut down, get it through the space. Also, a lot of hot exhausts are coming out of some of those. So the high temperature, the fact that it's an industrial environment, there are appropriately particular, led us to kind of try to keep those up. The reason we did put the arch louver western side was to reduce the amount of things. What's out there is most of themselves. There's one location that has fixed.
So most of these are exhaust ducts with hot air coming out of them.
Correct.
I understand. Are those plumbing?
Yes, toilet ducts, that's right, TX ducts.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, the last slide along Carter Road, I'm just wondering if that proposed, whatever it is, fence, it looks sort of like bamboo or something.
The taco.
The purpose of that, and does it need to be that high, you know? Because it seems like most of your plans are fairly transparent, let's put it that way.
Is this the slide you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. And the question is on the plantings?
Fence, yeah.
The fence. That's actually, those are the backside of the containers that house the taco business. So we're adding cladding to the traffic, mitigate the perspective. It could be removed. That's not, sorry, but that's
Yeah.
effectively. Those are shipping containers.
So they're shipping containers. You can see that maybe if you go to the plan, you
So
can
it's
show where they
concealing
are.
the shipping containers.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Okay,
image
that-
shows the other
I
side.
understand, I understand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
got
Yeah,
it.
it's hard to even tell in this image that it's a volume.
From some of
Looks
the
like a
other
fence.
aspects, yeah. it
But the
doesn't-
plan
I
shows
see
the
it over
volume.
there.
Yeah, I'll go back. So this is a
That side. Mhm.
faded slightly, but here you can see
The three,
these.
really, to mask
containers.
them, that's the
Yeah.
purpose of it.
That's right. And
Okay.
we've treated Carter Road, I mean, the project sort of has a backside along Carter Road in effect. So it's more open to the waterfront. So that when we've mitigated that experience with planters. Sort of soften the effect of the container.
Just in terms of I know you were talking about Carter Road as being sort of the back. When one comes off the ferry, which direction do most people go in, and is Carter Road a heavily trafficked road by the public?
Carter Road is a shared pedestrian and vehicular private street. People do walk off the ferry along Carter Road depending on their destination. I think
Okay.
a lot of people come off the Manhattan Ferry and go straight up the hill towards Fort J.
Right.
Towards Castle Williams. I think more people off the Brooklyn Ferry are coming along this road.
Got it.
But it is the principal ring road of the island as well. So there's, trash trucks, any deliveries that are happening are coming along this road. And, part of our thought too was, currently there's a bunch of parking spaces along the building that's used today. By having that new entry there and sort of improving the quality of that backside, which is just a parking lot today, that we're actually improving the pedestrian quality of the project along Carter in a subtle way, right?
Okay,
I'm not sure if
thank
that
you.
answers your.
It's helpful. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
The ramp that you're putting, it's on the backside of the building, I think. Am I correct? But it's all concrete. Was there any thought of making brick so that it would fit in like your wing walls do?
A ramp? Is it a ramp or a lift that's before us?
That's the lift.
Okay, so the ADA ramp is eligible for staff level
There's
approval?
Existing ramps around the building.
Correct.
So it's a
Existing
new
ramps.
lift and a partial rebuild of the one set of stairs on the.
Okay, so there are existing ramps at the building, but you are proposing a lift and modifying some steps. So if you could just walk us
Sure.
through that, that would be helpful. I missed it also in the presentation.
Making my way back, apologies. Right, so this new entry on Carter Road, we are proposing there's an existing curb that runs along, a concrete curb that runs along Carter Road, sort of a truncated sidewalk. We're proposing really just extend that curb line out up to the curb height to get into the door, right? So there's a small 1 to 20 ramp. It's basically in the same language of the existing curb that exists there. It's just, otherwise you can't get into the building. Right? So,
I see.
it's
So
a very
there's
small-
currently concrete there and they're
Yes.
just, that's staff level. That's staff level.
Right, it's currently concrete. I'll go to the other entry. This one,
go.
this is on the eastern side. So the current condition is a concrete stair with brick wing walls and a sort of galvanized metal rail that was added in I think 52 or 55. We are proposing to rebuild that and matching existing concrete security. Expand the landing, the concrete landing, over to receive an ADA lift up at that elevated. Because this is an existing elevated slab. It's over 5 feet vertical, so ramping to get there is significant.
Right.
So the lift was the conceived of the best way to efficiently get out of the building without breaking. Large costs and get some large. So this was our intent to do something within the character, like really rebuild what's there, but add a lift that meets the.
Okay. And the lift is rendered as if it has transparent panels. Is
It's
that the,
glass.
it's glass?
Right. So
Okay.
we attempted to find the most minimal glassy lift we could get our hands on. Many of them are not fairly unsightly and come in, like cream colors and things along those lines. This was the best lift that we had found, but the idea was to keep it as glassy as possible so you see through it and see the existing building, and it kind of mitigates its impact visually.
Okay. All right. Does that okay. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Two additional questions. One is, can the lift come in other colors besides the black?
I think there are other color options.
Okay. The other question is, in the presentation that I'm looking at, I guess online, there are things you're showing here that aren't in this presentation. Like you seem to show full drawings for the shade structure. Here, like the detail for the post
in the appendix that we showed.
Right. That isn't in the appendix we have, I see here, which just has the window details.
Got it. Those were added.
The applicant added additional slides
There
at
was
the
a
last
request for-
minute, so they weren't in the sets that were available over the
Thank you.
Request for additional information. So, yeah.
All right. Other questions? All right. Let's see if we have public testimony, and we'll come back to you. And I'll note that there's no one in the room to speak on this item, so I will turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We currently have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society supports most of the changes proposed in requests 1 through 5 at Building 140 on Governor's Island. However, because the presentation does not include any detailed drawings, we urge the Commission to require more information on the installation of the proposed ADA lift, Request 3, where it's set against the historic masonry. We also urge modifications to the window infill at the basement, Request 5. Recessing the new infill an inch or two behind the historic masonry will leave evidence of the evolution of this facade and should not impact function. We'll note that the use of aluminum-clad wood to replace non-historic windows and doors for this project seems appropriate in such an exposed location, that the proposed signage is modestly scaled for a building of this size, that the design of the signage and the installation of the ductwork at the roof both seem in keeping with the utilitarian nature of the structure, and that the work will only require removing or concealing a minimal amount of historic masonry. Concerning the prominent louver proposed for the large arched window at the west facade, we find this troubling aesthetically, but we note that the window being replaced is not historic and the work is reversible. Setting the louver back further behind the framing and giving the louver a darker finish may help maintain the integrity of this large arched opening. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval of the proposed access ramp and building entry storefront, and they recommend to find another less conspicuous place on the island for photovoltaics.
Those have been removed.
And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay. All right. You can certainly respond now. And I know you said the photovoltaics that were mentioned in the Community Board 1's testimony are not part of the proposal
they've been
anymore.
removed.
Would you like to respond to any of the other comments we've heard?
No, I think they were clear.
Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So why were the photovoltaics removed and where were they?
So they were on the roof of the Carter Road side. And they were something we were looking at for resiliency on the projects. I think with the funding, but also, community board potential opposition to them, also potential tax credit opposition to them, we're looking for alternate places on the island to put photovoltaics, but they're really an item that the trust was interested in. They could be added at a later date, so we've removed them for now, to make the project more palatable. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that there isn't a conflict with the state on the historic tax credits, because we certainly do encourage and support photovoltaic and solar panels.
Yeah, it's something we could continue considering
Great.
that, just been removed at this point.
All right. Other questions, commissioners? Any other final questions? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And there are 7 items basically before us. So as we comment, let's try to comment on each component of the application. We have the louver in the arched transom at the gable end of the building, the west end, I think, of the building. We have the glass ADA lift and the extending the landing at the stair at the east end of the building. On Carter Road, dropping a sill to create a new entrance door, and then signage at the 2 entries that includes pin-mounted signs and blade signs, 1 each. The ducts at the southern roof, and then we have the seasonal shading structures on the water side of the building, which are powder-coated aluminum frames that will be semi-permanent and most likely there all the time, and then canopies that retract and come and go. There's also a tent adjacent to the building. And finally, the Taco Vista semi-permanent containers clad in cedar with signage on top, and then the shade structure behind that. So I wonder if maybe for the purposes of the discussion, that maybe the plan drawing might be best so we can see all components. All right, Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start?
Okay. So I do hope at a future date, if you can find a way to put in the PV and less of it, but putting it in on the island to create resiliency and also lowering fossil fuel use is good. In general, I think this is a really good project, restoring the building, adaptive reuse of the building, and in general, making the accessibility is good. I have 2 to 3 comments of things to work on with staff. One is if you could make those ducts smaller in the roof, or do something where you didn't do the whole, have to bring them down, it would be good, but I realize you need them, and that is probably the best place to do it. I think the comment on the louvers in the arch of keeping the frame right, but making the louvers a darker color will do 2 things. It'll make it look more like the window. Also, it will hide the dirt that will inevitably come as the louvers run. And, the shading structure next to the building, and I realize it isn't on the building, seems like it may be somewhat, I'll be curious what the other commissioners say. I realize why you need it, but if there was any way to minimize how it looked, that would be good. But in general, I think the signage is fine. I think creating the new entrance makes total sense, and I'm looking forward to seeing the building restored.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm glad that Commissioner Ginsburg pointed out. The western facade is the main visible facade. So when you first made the presentation, I was wondering whether there's another place to do the louver, because that's the dominant facade that you will see, even though Carter Row is the main thoroughfare. I'm not clear into the attic whether that is done, but I think his comment is excellent about darker color because the grime will show very light colors. I have no problem with the Carter Road entrance. I think that's logical, and I'm glad you're keeping it symmetrical. my one concern with the lift is that lately there's been a lot of attacks on these outdoor structures, whether it's acid or graffiti and that type of thing. So work with staff and see what type of preventive measure you can take. The shade is obviously something that I think everyone's noting that is depending, there are multiple options. And so clearly you could deploy different options. So that is to be studied. But in general, this is, I look forward to a great enhancement to the island.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
I think this is an uncommonly handsome building. The fact that it was built by the Army is really kind of incredible. Wonder if they're building buildings of this quality today. I doubt it. Certainly not under our purview, at least. It's such quality. I had to. I was taken somehow, not quite literally, but I checked on the internet. Inigo Jones's great Covent Garden Chapel of St. Paul's in London. Somehow the singularity of that end piece was really significant. So this is a great proposal. All in all, I have no issue with it at all. I think it's very well done, except for that question I asked earlier about those large ducts on the roof. The roof is really important, and the singular length of them, the uninterrupted nature of them seems to be an important part of the building's design. And yes, I understand that taking over the top half circle of at least one of those entry points for louvers is an issue. But somehow, if that's done well, and I think it's been explained by two commissioners so far in a way that would make it slightly better than you've shown, I would be, if it's possible, again, working with staff, if it's possible to either downsize the size, but ideally eliminate those rooftop louvers. Frankly, even if it's blowing a little hot air on guests who are walking down that road, I would be in favor of that as opposed to changing the roof. The roof is really an important piece of this building, I think. Anyway, otherwise, great job.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Master.
Yeah, this is a very exciting project. I think it's going to do a lot for the island. I think you need a strong eating establishment like this, and I can see it becoming an important venue, especially given the waterfront views. Overall, I'm very supportive of it. I think Commissioner Ginsburg's suggestions on the louvers make a lot of sense. I think the ADA lift is necessary, and it seems like you've done a lot to minimize the visibility. The opening on Carter Road makes a lot of sense. Signage is minimal and necessary, and well placed, I believe. I actually, I understand that this is kind of an event venue and that, you have multiple restaurants here. So I actually think that the exhaust on the roof is probably necessary, and I'm actually okay with it. The only comment I have is on the shade structure. I think that if we work with staff to refine it, I think that might be very helpful. But overall, I think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Commissioners.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think it's great that they're doing this adaptive reuse and making it accessible. And I share Commissioner Bland's concerns about the ducts are really the only thing that seem kind of intrusive. And if it's possible to make them less visible or eliminate them, that would be great. I mean, we're giving a, report anyway, so these are, recommendations, but I think that would be very helpful because the roof line is important. I think what they're doing for the accessibility with the glass lift and the new entrance with the shallow ramps is great, and that that will be the new entrance will be perfectly appropriate and minimally intrusive. And I think the signage on the building, the pin mounted, and the what do you call it? Also the blade signs are modest and appropriate. The shades structures and the you know the signage there, I think it's a little unclear what exactly may happen, and it would be useful if they could work a little with the staff on refining the details there. And that, I think that the way they mask the containers is probably really appropriate and on the back side of the building. So though I ask a question about that, I don't have a real issue about that. So in general, I'm totally in support of the proposal with a few comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I think I'm generally in agreement with everyone's sentiments. A few comments that throw into the heap. For me, the most important view corridors for the building are, number one, as you're coming in on the ferry, and number two, as you're walking down Carter Road. For that reason, I think that I would suggest that they put, and also looking at the plan, thinking about feasibility, I would say put all those nasty roof vents over the top right quadrant of the building, which would be more or less hidden by the gable as you're approaching from the boat, and more or less hidden by the ridge as you're walking down Carter Road. So I would say if you I'm sure you do have to have all that stuff, and I understand why it wouldn't really work as facade stuff, but I think that consolidating it to a combination of wall louvers and rooftop goosenecks in I guess that's the northeast quadrant of the roof, would probably result in less visibility of those things. I would express a concern that the staff be very careful with the brick replacement program that's called out. Old worn bricks are nice things on old worn buildings, and new bricks often don't match. So I would just ask the staff to be vigilant on that. I have no problem with the signage, no problem with the lift. I think for the same reason that I articulated about the visibility issue, I have no problem with the shade structure on the east, but I do have concerns about the shade structure on the west, that it be more visible. So when the staff is working with the applicants, that they try to achieve a higher level of visibility of the building from the west.
Okay. All right. So I think we have a very supportive group here today. So thank you for that. And I think this is a great project for Governor's Island. And as we continue to see uses being put into the historic buildings here, it's really great for our historic district. So I think we can move to support this proposal today with 3 recommendations. One, to try to explore the feasibility of making the ducts smaller, less visible, and or eliminated, working with staff. To do the louvers in a darker color at the west end, and then to work with the staff on the details of the shade structures. And I think we'll have them work on all of the shade structure details, but particularly those adjacent to the building and particularly at the west end, to minimize the presence.
With regards to LPC 24-07729, Governor's Island, Building 140, Governor's Island Historic District. A Romanesque revival style storehouse / arsenal building built in 1875 and altered in 1938. Application is to modify entrance, install a barrier-free access lift, signage and rooftop mechanical equipment, alter the site and establish a master plan governing temporary site installations. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Governor's Island Historic District. I recommend that a positive report with modifications be issued, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the scale of the building can support the presence of a new entrance along Carter Road, and the proposed new entrance doors will be centrally located and well-scaled to the lawn facade, that the proposed modifications of the windows to door will enable removal of not only a minimal amount of historic fabric, and that the proposed door will feature divided lights that approximate the dimensions and details of the adjacent windows, that the new entrance will include a low concrete entry platform with shallow ramps and no railings, allowing barrier-free access to the first floor level in the least intrusive manner possible, that the proposed east entrance modifications will accommodate barrier-free access to the raised east portion of the first floor of the building and will feature concrete steps, brick curbs, and metal handrails that are in keeping with the materiality and details of the historic entrance, that the proposed platform lid at the east entrance will be located south of the entrance stair to receive from view when seen from the principal ferry pedestrian access path, will have a dark finish to match the adjacent ironwork and will be stored in the down position to minimize its visual presence. That the proposed exhaust vent at the south portion of the roof will not be visible from a primary northern western vantage point of the ferry piers and pedestrian access paths and will be finished in a dark gray to match the existing roof to help these features recede from when seen in conjunction with the roof's southern vantage point. However, we will make some recommendations on minimizing that. That the proposed pin-mounted and bracket signs will be located adjacent to the entrance and are well scaled to the building and will be mounted through plain masonry. That the establishment of a master plan for temporary installations around the site will ensure a cohesive design and facilitate the seasonal installation of certain features as needed. That the presence of temporary installations and portable event structures at the specified locations at the east and north portion of the site will not detract from the building or the surrounding landscape and will support the adaptive reuse of the building. That the proposed installation, including tent seating planters, will be installed on a seasonal basis for less than 1 year and will not cause damage to significant protected architectural features of the site. That an acceptable plan and time schedule for dismantling of the seasonal installation will be submitted to the commission as a component of future applications, that the proposed work will support the reactivation of this long vacant building and site and will enhance the Governor's Island Historic District. However, I find that the proposed seasonal shade structure in the front of the building and larger structure next to the door at the top, actually, we were fine with the taco stand, are schematic in design and should be developed with review of staff to minimize its impact on the building. That the louver in the entry door, rounded entry door, be painted a somewhat darker color to approximate the glass it is replacing, and that the ductwork on the roof be minimized or relocated to minimize its effect on the long roof structure. Right, thank you, to the extent that's feasible.
Jen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 24-09650, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 170, Lot 7501. 346 Broadway, AKA 108 Leonard Street and 50 Lafayette Street, the former New York Life Insurance Company building, individual and interior landmark. This is a neo-Italian Renaissance style monumental skyscraper with neo-Italian Renaissance style interiors designed by Stephen D. Hatch and McKimmon and White, built in 1894 to 98. The application is to legalize alterations to the designated interior lobby space in non-compliance with LPC permits.
Good morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. As Corey mentioned, we're here to talk about 346 Broadway. And I'm joined today by Tim Rooney of Jeffrey Beers International. They are the interior designers for the project. Alex Olson of Civic Center Community Group Broadway, the developers, and Nick Hawkins of Greenberg Traurig, who is land use counsel on the project. And we're going to be looking, I'm going to fast forward here to this slide. We're going to be looking at 4 specific elements within the completed lobby space at 108 Leonard, namely the bronze ornaments on the wall, the flooring pattern, and then 2 pieces of furniture, the existing reception desk and the art glass cabinet that exists behind the reception desk currently in the public lobby. So this is technically a legalization, but this is not an instance where the applicant has disregarded the process. The developer undertook the work in good faith, and we view these issues really as miscommunications during the permitting process. Beyond the permitting process, we believe that the work is appropriate based on a few primary ideas. Those that the elements serve simple programmatic needs in an enormous adaptive reuse project. And that those elements have been carefully detailed and are artistic elements that respond to the surrounding architecture within the space and rise to the quality and character of the historic fabric itself. And of course, reflecting this new layer of the building's history. For transparency, our office did not work on the original project. This has been ongoing for 10 years, but we've been working with the development team over the past few years to try to close out the project. And this is a very important step as part of that process. So I'm going to start with an overview of the project. Some of you were commissioners at the time the original project came through, but most of you were not. So I'll give you a bit of history and context. And then Tim is going to share with you the specifics of the design proposal and the intent when they were in the design process. And then I'm going to come back and explain a bit about the permit history and how we got here. So of course, here is the site, 346 Broadway, the former New York Life Insurance Company building. This is familiar to you as you recently saw the gallery in the art gallery that was approved in the banking hall. It is a 12-story neo-Renaissance commercial building. It is a full block. It occupies the block between Broadway, Lafayette, Leonard Street, and Catherine Lane. And it is an exterior landmark and then has a collection of interior spaces that are also designated. So here is just to give you a sense of the context of the project. On the right are 2 images from the 2014 project. The city acquired the building. It was New York Life stayed in the building until 1928. They moved uptown. There were a host of owners in the interim. City acquires it in the 1960s and has a number of agencies and courts that were housed in the building. In 2013, it is sold to Civic Center Community Group for the residential conversion. And in 2014, LPC approved a comprehensive project to convert the building for residential use. So on the right, we see this is the exterior scope of work. It included full restoration of the building envelope, the full block building, 100% window replacement, new entries, new penthouses up on the roof, and then at the interior, conversion of the interior for 167 new residential units. There are public spaces, amenity space, and commercial space all as part of that. But what was very complicated about it is the interior designations. And so in the elevation on the right, you can see all of the interior designated spaces. There are 6 groupings of rooms that extend all the way up through the building. And this was largely because this was all public, because it was a city-owned building at the time. And so you have the main building lobby, the banking hall, which you recently reviewed, executive offices on the 2nd floor, president's office on the 4th floor, a stair that runs the full height of the building, and then the clock tower interior here. So all of this made for a very challenging conversion process, but also a complicated review and approval process for the commission. On the left, we see some of the restored interior spaces. On the top is the marble room. This is sort of speaks to the complexity of the project overall. But this was originally the anteroom for the president's office, originally located on the 4th floor, was relocated as part of the project to the 1st floor and fully reconstructed. So this is the restored, reinstalled anteroom. And then, of course, the banking hall that you see at the bottom here. So just to give you an idea of how expansive and detailed the overall project was. So here are the existing conditions within the restored lobby. We have, it's a double height space, 2 massive marble stairs that rise up to the mezzanine level, and then the mezzanine extends the same vocabulary that we see on the ground floor of the lobby. This is the primary residential lobby, and the restoration was designed by BBB, Buyer Blinder Bell, and the Jeffrey Beers International was the interior designer. And so, again, those 4 elements we'll be looking at are the bronze wall ornaments, the floor finish, the desk, and the art glass wall behind the desk. Just to step back and give you a sense of what happened historically, this is a photograph from right after the building was completed in the historic conditions. So we can see in the distance at the back, this curved wall. This was the primary location. This was the elevator bank for the building. And these were originally bronze doors with grills above. And then you can see the sort of curve of the wall is followed in the moldings of the ceiling, and that is then mirrored on the floor. The flooring was a light marble, light stone finish, and you can see it has panelized configuration, so borders running through the space, mirroring the moldings above, and then ornamented with geometric forms. And those panels, the borders, are really linking the major architectural features. So it goes from column to column and then extends back around the curved apse of the elevator bay. And you can also see that the marble balustrade rising up to the mezzanine level of the public lobby. So this is all part of the designated lobby space currently and all publicly accessible. By the time the city's occupancy, things were quite different. So you can see here, these are the conditions at the start of the project. We have all the marble finishes are painted. The historic floor had been removed, and it's contemporary terrazzo on the floor, and partitions and equipment had been added throughout the space. The apse wall, or the curved wall, had been significantly altered. All of the historic elevator doors and grill work had been removed, and it had all been sheetrocked over. And so this was the existing condition that the commissioners were considering in 2014 when the project started. And I think from here, Tim is going to come and take you through the design proposal, and then I'll come back and talk with you about the permits.
Thank you, everyone. Timothy Rooney, partner at Jeffrey Beers International. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. We wanted to take a moment just to sort of take a step back and talk about the original design vision for this building. It's not common that we have the opportunity to work in a historic McKim-Mead and White building, 130 years old. And we really wanted to embrace that as part of the core DNA, as we call it, for the design, both for the public spaces as well as the interiors as well. we use a word, one of our sort of core DNA was pedigree. You know, looking at this amazing building, looking at the detail, the quality of the craftsmanship of the original construction was very important to us, to identify and to restore and maintain and be a main contributor to the story. Elegance is another thing. It goes back to the pedigree. It's what, you know, the artistry of the original architecture. We wanted to bring in art as a main component to this. As part of, we had a vision of a modern insertion in a classic shell. Thinking of this almost as a grand New York apartment that you've inherited. It's been passed down from generation to generation in a family. And now it's your turn, it's your generation to take over this apartment and be a caretaker for it. And how do you put your stamp on it, albeit temporary, to make it sort of your generation? And that sort of speaks to this board here, Time to Come Home, the residential interiors themselves. Now, we took the idea of this main lobby, the Leonard Street lobby, as sort of a driving force for the entire design. In the residential interiors, we recreated walls that had panelized walls, wainscoting, crown molding of a historic sort of quality to create that classic shell. Even the kitchens had a rear wall of molded cabinets, white to blend into the walls. But the modern insertion was of this generation. The island, the kitchen island, became a modern insertion. It had modern design details, modern materiality, as well as, you know, the artwork and the furniture that the resident would place in the unit to tell the story of their time. So, looking at this main driver, the Leonard Street lobby, we wanted to take all of those ethos and apply them here. We painstakingly restored all of the lobby, the marble, which was just noted that it was painted at the time. The flooring was changed to terrazzo over the years. So we wanted to bring back the historic character as the shell. So cleaning up the marble and then installing this floor pattern here, which you see still emulates the molding and the sort of the architecture of the space back to the original design. So we have different types of marble, creating a dark border, and then a field interlay in the center. You'll see there are some elements of the space which are needed for a modern residence. This is a conversion from an office building into a residential tower. So there are some needs that the residents need for that. So you can see there's a couple of furniture groupings directly off of the Leonard Street lobby entry at the top. And in the center of what used to be the elevator bank, we have a front desk, a concierge desk, and a illuminated glass panel wall feature that really just provides that element for the guests and the residences and creates a modern insertion with furniture. This is a circulation diagram. It was very important to us that we have the residents interact throughout the lobby and that all of the elements are really enjoyed throughout the day. This is one of 3 lobbies, and there is 2 on each end that are much smaller and not in landmark condition. They were recreated in sort of a vocabulary that responded to this lobby, but all of the residences need to come to this center area at some point. There is a motor court entry off to the left of this plan, which you see sort of the blue lines coming in, as well as an elevator coming off of the center core and the core to the west. On the east, you have the purple line, the magenta line coming in from the side, as well as you could enter directly in from the street from Leonard or come down from the stairs of mezzanine in those orange yellow lines. Now then from there are 3 elements that are behind what used to be the historic elevator lobby panels. Those on the left-hand side, lower left, is the mailroom where all the guests or residents need to come down to get their mail. And the center is a new elevator that brings you down to the amenity space in the cellar. And to the right of that is a new stairway also bringing you down to the cellar level amenities. So this diagram just shows how everyone needs to come in behind the glass art wall and then into these spaces on a daily basis. Some drawings to that, which were incorporated into the original submission. We have a new vestibule space that was created for an airlock into the lobby, and just showing sort of the recreation of the some of the elements in the space and restoration of those marble features. This is a photo from the second level. This is showing sort of in detail the recreation of the elevator doors. So sort of grill work, which was an elevator and then the shaft panel above. Again, in the center, you can see an opening for a new elevator. And on the left, those gates open up to access the stair to the mezzanine level. You can see a bit of the flooring, again, reacting to the shape of the original design of the flooring. And then this is a rendering we had done in the original submission of the Leonard Street lobby. So it's showing all the restoration work that was completed, including all the light fixtures, the marble, and then the replacement of the flooring with the darker borders and then lighter stone, etc. These are photos which were taken very recently of the lobby itself. It was a rainy day, so there's a runner here, but you can see the marble flooring to the side of the runner, as well as some of the carpets that were underneath the furniture group. But you can see these modern insertions that we created. This is the concierge desk, the front desk. Behind that is the illuminated art glass. And we wanted these to feel like art pieces, as we described for the residential interiors. Additional photos here. So you can see the glass panels follow the shape of both the flooring as well as the recreated molding of the ceiling. And then that same curve continues in the front desk here on the right. Additional photos just showing the detail of the recreation of the grills for the elevator. And this is on the lower level, so this is where you really interact. On the right-hand photo, you're seeing the doors open. That's to the center elevator. And then the opening on the far right of the photo is your access to the mailroom for the residents. The left photo is your stair going down to the residences, as well as access to a restroom on the left. This slide speaks to the artistry of the glass. We commissioned an artist, glass artist in Seattle, to create a custom cast glass mold for us and cast glass panels. So you can see the finished product on the left, sort of the texture that's created in the glass. It's quite thick, this glass, this cast glass. On the top upper right image, you see the custom mold that was created. We wanted this sort of water-like effect in that. So the glass is poured in this mold, it's cast, and it comes to the site with that texture on the rear panel. Again, touching on the photos. Oh, this is you? Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Should have had a page break there. Okay, so just going back to the permitting process, the history of the project. This was, as we discussed in the beginning, this was a complicated designation. It was a complicated approval, and it resulted in a complex permitting process. There are over 15 permits on the project, over 1,000 sheets of approved drawings, and a constant stream of samples approvals, as you might imagine, for all of the restorative work that was being undertaken at the building. It was a multi-agency review that has gone on for over a decade. And there were two architects. Beyer Blinder Bell started the project. SLCE was the architect of record going forward. And the two staff people that worked on those primary filings at Landmarks are no longer with the commission. So there's just been a lot of activity over a very long period of time. And so we're going to take a look at sort of the public hearing scope, and then the permits that were issued over time and the drawings. So here is a sheet from, or materials from the public hearing. And so on the left is the historic plan at the lobby, the proposed plan at the time of the project in 2014. This is from the public hearing. And as you can see, like the details that Tim was showing about the development behind, outside the landmark space where it's shown as a lounge, this is very early in the development of the project. And so things evolved over time. There was a reception desk shown here, but there were no details of that reception desk included otherwise included in the presentation. And then this rendering was included, showing the openings at the former elevator bays, looking to the lounge beyond, and then the reception desk was not included in the rendering, but the floor at that time was intended to be restorative in nature, a light stone floor that recalled the panelized system, and with geometric lozenges within the sort of central curved section. As the project developed in the fall of 2016, the design team met with Landmark staff to review a proposal for interior changes that included the desk, the art glass cabinet that's here, and a black marble floor. At that meeting, it was determined that everything could be approved at staff level as an amendment to the certificate of appropriateness, except for the black marble floor. And they were advised to reconsider the stone, something lighter and more consistent with the historic. And so in September of that year, they came back with a revised scheme, which is what has been constructed. It is a chevron pattern with bleu de Savoie, sort of a gray marble that's surrounded by black banding, black and white banding that outlines that hierarchy of the architecture above. And you can see here the desk, which Tim was describing, the desk and the cabinet, and how it's responding to the radial forms within the space. So the cabinet is, the desk sort of nests within the overall radius of the cabinet itself. There were two major permitting exercises for this, aside from the very many other permits, but there was the initial C of A that was issued in 2015 by Beyer Blinder Bell C of A set, and then there was an extensive comprehensive amendment that was issued in 2018, and the changes, with the understanding that the changes could be approved at staff level, the changes to the interior design were included in that 2018 set. So we see here detail sheets showing the proposed desk, the proposed wall, the cabinet system with the art glass, the faceted art glass. And so all of this was detailed, and this is an approved drawing that was included in that 2018 set. Similarly with the floor, we have the 2016 rendering showing the floor pattern, a detail from the 2018 set showing the chevron pattern, and the finish schedule, which indicated the bleu de Savoie marble in a chevron pattern in the lobby. Of course, there were inconsistencies in the set as well. This is another sheet that was included in that 2018 set, which showed the previous Beyer Blinder Bell design for the floor. This was an outdated drawing that was erroneously included in the set, but still carried that original design. But we know it's outdated because in the note here, it says finished TBD. And we know from the other material that was submitted at the time that the finish had been resolved and that it had been reviewed with LPC staff. So the work was undertaken and completed with the assumption that it had been reviewed and approved. It was not an act of bad faith in any way, and the work was executed as was shown in the drawings. Finally, the last bit is the historic bronze elements that are on the east and west walls of the lobby. You can see the historic details here. They were bronze bellflower laurels on the sides, and then with the New York Life Insurance Company monogram at the center, and that was embedded within a fasces. Fasces were a bundle of sticks with an axe head, and that was the classical. It was a classical motif used in classical revival and neoclassical architecture as a sign of the strength of the government, the power of the government, and the security of the institution. At some point prior to the project, that the fasces and the monogram were removed and replaced with a sort of crudely faceted piece of wood, and the piece of wood had the bronze axe head attached to it. We're not sure when that happened or why, but that in 2019, Beyer Blinder Bell had, when that came off the wall, Beyer Blinder Bell examined it, realized that it was not historic, that the wood section was a sort of crudely fashioned vertical element at the center, and proposed that it not be included in the restorative work. Beyond that, the fasces, of course, had a very long history, but in the early 20th century was adopted by Mussolini and became the symbol of the fascist movement, and persisted through World War II, and then more recently has been adopted by right-wing extremists as a symbol likening itself to that which Mussolini propagated. So we believe that it would be inappropriate, fundamentally inappropriate, to recreate that element, especially in the absence of the historic element being extant at the time of the project start. As we look at the details itself, the laurels create a wreath-like ornament on the wall, which is a typical classical detail. We think that the restored bronze work itself can stand alone and doesn't need a vertical element within it, and that it is very much consistent with classical ornament that we see elsewhere, without feeling the absence of the non-historic element that was extant at the beginning of the project. And so finally, just a comparative view, the project, the lobby space at the time of the project start and the conditions we see here, and the existing condition as built. As I said, this was not a sort of standard situation with a violation. It's a hugely complex project that had a lot of paper involved. We believe, and we believe that the developers acted in good faith to build what was approved and to build something that was appropriate within the space, and that it is a vast improvement over the previously existing condition. And can leave it there.
Yeah. So what exactly are we being asked to approve today?
So the commission today is being asked to legalize the installation of the illuminated cast glass partition, the reception desk, and the modification to the floor, using the kind of light gray with the black bordered patterns, and also to approve the removal of those fascies from the wall without having to put those back.
All right, so given that, how are we supposed to think about the fact or the presentation of approved construction documents for the elements that we are being asked to now approve?
I think the best way, I think best way to think about this is a big project with lots of moving parts, and as the presentation discussed, a huge amount of paper and amendments and other things. And I think from the staff's perspective and in my review, things slipped through. I think there was miscommunications. I don't think there was, bad faith. There are some things that, anyway, so I just think that's the way to view this. I think this was really a situation where they thought they had approval. The staff, didn't necessarily agree with that. Some drawings were perforated. They weren't necessarily where one would expect them, perhaps, in the overall set of a huge amount of drawings. So I think that's the way we're viewing it, this as a good faith effort to do something that the staff, that these elements weren't approved explicitly
Right,
by
so
the staff.
So
So-
go ahead.
So they weren't approved explicitly, and so not really covered in the permit language. And
Mhm.
so we need to now actually review and approve it. So even though they were slipped through on some perforated drawings, they actually were not approved by us as a body.
So it's the opinion of the staff that the elements that were listed were not something that should be subject to staff level approval?
Correct.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also just worth mentioning, some of these things that are furniture-like elements, there's a approach that is sometimes taken where if an element in a space is furniture and we kind of deem it that and consider it that and fully movable, usually modular, things like that, then you might end up with something not so different than what you see here, but because they could be picked up and moved and slid around, we don't regulate them. They're movable furniture. Whatever those conversations were earlier in this project, I wasn't a part of, I don't know, but I think as it turned out, it became more of a permanent built-in thing with the special order glass and the cabinetry and all of that. So that's where it may have moved from an earlier discussion into something that it is now. I don't know, but I think the point I would make is we do often not even regulate, and they're allowed to put in furniture on a lot of interiors, and this sort of crossed the line, and that's the other reason we're looking at it.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Approach this as a new conceptual room that they're doing. The question I have is it's a beautiful room, obviously, but the circular patterns on the floor, is that just an invention? That's just a creative invention? Is it carpet or is it?
This,
It's not.
on the right here, like
On the boat, right in.
this, like, yeah, that's just a rug.
The little carpet.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, let's see if we have any public testimony. I'll note there's no one in the room to speak on this item, so I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. I see one remote participant with their hand raised. Oh, two actually. So the first we'll be hearing from is John Graham for the Victorian Society of New York. John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Okay. And once you've been promoted, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham of the Victorian Society. We have 2 points to make about this application. First, many members of the public who are experienced preservationists reviewed the presentation. No one was able to figure out what work is proposed for legalization. This is actually reflected in Commissioner Goldblum's question. We expect this will be explained during the hearing, but that doesn't give the public any means of reviewing it and preparing testimony. We ask that the hearing remain open. The applicant be directed to revise the presentation to adequately explain the proposal, and that the public be given the opportunity to testify on it at a future hearing. Second, slide 2 of the presentation has a diagram of designated interiors and creates 2 categories of significance: primary and secondary. We must point out that no such distinction is made in the designation report. We must also point out that the landmarks law provides for making no such distinction in the designation of interior landmarks. We request that the Commission require the applicant to revise this drawing so that the permanent record of the project accurately reflects the interior designation. This attempt by the applicant to create alternate facts should not be allowed to stand. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Okay. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC was also unable to evaluate this request for legalization because the presentation did not clearly show how the applicant deviated from LPC approved plans. However, we similarly question why the applicant had created a hierarchy of significance for the designated interiors here. In this presentation, the applicant labels the interiors as being of, quote, primary or secondary significance. We find this arbitrary. There is no delineation in the designation report between primarily significant designated interiors and secondarily significant designated interiors. Just because the applicant believes some of these spaces are less significant doesn't mean that's the case. In fact, this building is both an individual and interior landmark. It is a significant piece of architecture inside and out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval unless it is confirmed that any part of the privatized art gallery condominium spaces is also part of the deed restricted public media lab space. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, so I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond.
Sorry for the confusion about what was before you today. Maybe that speaks to how well designed it is. I don't know, but and it was calendared, and we did provide all the documentation. And I mean, therein lies the rub. It's unclear. You can't show an approved and a plan that has the unapproved work because they're one and the same. That being said, just to clarify, the plan that was referred to by both HDC and John Graham was the plan, the elevation from 2014. So that was materials, a part of the materials provided by the applicant at that time in order to wrestle with the complicated process of converting the building. And so there was an analysis at that time about what was most significant about those interior designated spaces because this is such an unusual designation. And so these are simply drawings that were taken from the 2014. We are not, and none of that even relates to the lobby is of the utmost significance, and we recognize that. So there was no intention to try to steer anything based on a hierarchy of significance there. And then the only other thing that I would note, and this relates back to what Corey was describing, is that this is furniture. It is not attached. The wall and the desk, the cabinet and the desk are not attached to the floor. They are powered from below. There's one outlet to each. Of course, the cabinet is substantial and would not be the easiest thing to move on a regular basis. But it is furniture. And by that, it also means that it's not permanent. Much like restaurant design would be, I think that lobbies will evolve over time, and that this isn't necessarily a permanent feature built into the space. It is truly furniture. It is a cabinet. It holds packages. It's adjacent to the mailroom, and the back are doors that hold packages and other stuff for the concierge at the reception desk. And so I think that about sums up.
Okay, thank you. And I think also the way it was, the item was calendared on the agenda specifically says that the work is in the lobby.
In the lobby. Right.
So I think, thank you for mentioning that those drawings with the different colored spaces were part of the 2014 application and just copies and not relevant to this application. Okay. All right, so let's close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed. I will note for the record that Vice Chair Bland is recused on this item. And so, as we've heard, this was a long project over the course of many, many years, which involved multiple staff people, multiple applicant teams, and more than multiplied many times rolls of drawings. And so some drawings were perforated, which led to miscommunication. But there are 4 items that we have to actually act on in order for this project to be whole and to be closed out. And those items include the flooring, the art glass cabinet, the desk, and the removal of that ornament, which had been replaced with wood anyway in the front portion of the lobby. And I just would note that, and you can see it in some of the side-by-side photographs, that at the time of designation, the historic decorative metal elevator grills didn't exist. The marble flooring had been removed, and much of that has been recreated by the applicant as part of our previous approvals in this space. So at the time of designation, we were looking at a much different space. And so these 4 items that we're looking at today, I think, can be viewed within that context. And there is a circulation pattern now, which brings people around that art glass cabinet to see those beautifully restored, replicated elevator grills in a way that obviously didn't exist before, because they had been removed prior to designation. So there's the flooring, which is an interpretation of the historic flooring, which didn't exist at the time of designation. The table and the art glass cabinet, and which corresponds to the pattern in the floor, and then the removal of the ornament. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that the floor pattern is appropriate. It carries forth the spirit of the original, which was light gray stone. I think that the desk is appropriate because it reads as a piece of furniture and is subservient to the overall space. I think that the removal of fascies, let's hope that they remain unpopular because of their 1930s associations, but you never know these days. So I think it's okay that they're not there. I think for me, the real problem is the glass wall and cabinet, quote unquote. And the problem I have with it is that it blocks the view of the apse, which was a historically significant, critical element of the entry composition. The reading of that 2-story apse was what was the original architectural intent of this space, and the height and extent of that wall inhibit that reading completely. That said, I feel very reluctant to kind of bring down the axe on something that was A, quite expensive, and B, the product of a sincere attempt to follow the rules that evidently went afoul. I think that therefore solutions might be available that would allow for retaining it in some measure without while achieving the goals of the space. One might be to split it in 2 and rotate it forward so that you could see through it. One might be to lower it so that instead of being 8 feet high or whatever it is, it allowed for the visibility of the transom line above the doors from the entry. I think that they could work with staff on that, but I think that the goal should be that visibility of the apse as an architectural form be retained on 2 levels.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
So on everything but the curved wall, totally agree with Commissioner Goldblum and think is appropriate. And I'm sort of torn on the curved wall because I don't think it's horrible, but I think Commissioner Goldblum's point that it's somewhat it limits the view of the restored metalwork, and the concept of the space is valid. So I'd work with staff to try to find some sort of solution. I realize cutting it, that glass probably can't be cut down. I don't know if it can be split. It's almost like if the glass was there without anything else behind it, freestanding, so you could somewhat see the grill work, it might work. So I'd work with staff to try and work out a solution.
And, one thing I was thinking, and considered in the past when we have thought about items that we would prefer to see another way, is proposed, because it is removable, and actually its function brings people back to see the restored grills. But it is removable, and that is something, that could happen in the future. One thing that we've done when we've been sort of in a situation where something is there and in good faith, and there are some positives to it, is that we have we have approved it with or we've actually not approved it, but with allowed it to stay for an extended period of time. So giving them a longer date to comply and to remove it. And so that's something I think we can think about here, as it is reversible. We could have it here for an extended period of time, at which point it either must be removed or they must come back to the commission for to legalize again or something else.
I think that would make sense, and I'm also conscious of the fact that this was not in any way done to mislead the commission. It was created by confusion with so much going on with the staff. So.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think the comments are excellent. I see Commissioner Goldblum nodding his head. Yeah, the floor pattern is appropriate. The desk is obviously very appropriate. It's a piece of furniture. And I think that Commissioner Ginsburg and Goldblum are all sort of in consent that your suggestion may be a good one, given the event. I have less problem with the light, obviously, because I see there's a practical need because you spend all this effort, and it's actually it sets the tone for transforming a space that respect the past, but at the same time brings an element. But obviously, maybe let's see how the rest of the commissioners feel, whether we want to give us some time element to consider whether it can be a half the height or some lowering of the thing. I do not know the specific of this work. Obviously, looks like there's a lot of effort made into creating something special.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master?
Yes, I was actually able to go to this lobby when we went to visit the Jack Scheinman Gallery. We actually visited this lobby, and it's spectacular. You guys did a wonderful job in the restoration. But the interesting thing is that I think that the most beautiful element of this lobby are the grills on the elevator. And so I think that's why we might have a little bit of an issue with with this piece, the lighted piece, because it really blocks what should be the focal point, which are these incredibly beautiful grills on the elevator. So obviously, I think the floor is okay, the laurels are okay, the desk is okay. And I'm just wondering, you do want people to come behind and take a look at the grills. Is there anything that we can do to the grills to kind of make it stand out a little bit more, whether it's like to put a dark infill behind some of the grills or to do some lighting to highlight it? In terms of the actual structure itself, I'm just going to have to defer to perhaps Commissioner Goldblum's suggestion, perhaps Commissioner Carroll's suggestion. I think it's a shame to say, get rid of it. But there is, it does block the view of these extremely beautiful ornamental grills, and I think that's a shame.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think the floor is appropriate. And what I particularly like about this project is that the shell, we kept the shell, and they brought in arts and craft, modern arts and craft, to build a new interior. And I think that's, not 1840 arts and craft, but new arts and craft. And I think the wall is beautiful. It's beautifully done, the glass wall. The idea of just how you see it, how you, maybe they should have had openings, but I think it works very well. I think it's a truly beautiful interior and conceptually beautiful and well done.
Commissioner Chapin.
So in general, I think the restoration was done very nicely, and obviously the group was continuing to try to work with the staff ongoing. So it's not a case of, an egregious, violation of intent here, but rather some miscommunications and things. So first of all, I think the flooring is totally fine, is well done, and returns it closer to the historic condition. The desk, I think, is perfectly acceptable. The storage partition, as others have said, I also find that it's unfortunate because it blocks the view of the grill and also of the shape. And I think the suggestions about putting a time limit on it being there is good. And then in the, or at least for them to return and request to continue it if, at that time, the commission so deems it appropriate. But I think also that working with the staff on the lighting of the partition, if you look at 26, not this one, you see that the lighting of that element is really, is really detracting from the side view, I think, of the grills, and also is, calling more attention to itself than necessary, because there is lighting for the person sitting at the desk above him. It's a spotlight, a track light, or there could be additional lighting if needed for the person sitting there. I think it's just intended as a kind of to bring people's eye to it, and they could either light the grills, as it was just being suggested, I think, by Commissioner Master, or else diminish the lighting on that partition, or both, that would really improve the situation in terms of perception of the grill. So I would suggest doing that in the interim until such time as that partition might be successfully removed, lowered, or changed in the future. And maybe, I don't know, we should obviously start talking about a time frame. I don't know whether it's 5 years, 10 years, but we could set a time frame for review.
Yeah, and we do have to, if we're going to do an extended compliance time or date, we should talk about whether that's 6 years would be the life of the permit, or 10 years it could be. Any thoughts on that? Yes.
I think we're looking at this strangely. We're looking at it axially, right? And it's an axial perspective. And if you move around each side, you start to see the back because it's curvy.
That's right.
So I think it's, how you perceive it has to, through movement, is.
That is a good point. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
Who's got an issue?
Okay. All right. So, I know that this is important to you to close out the project, but one thought we were just having is we could do a sort of a motion that approves everything, but just denies the cabinet in this form, but with an extended compliance date to come back with some modification. Or I think we were just suggesting that you do we could take no action today. You could do some lighting exploration and then come back to us and we could look at it again. So I think I leave it up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and having the commissioners come and look and see what they think. I think that might be or presentation or whatever.
We not do that anyway, I guess. Even if we. All right, so we'll take no action today. We will continue to think about how the lighting can be explored and then come back and address it again at a future date. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to break for lunch. We will come back at 1:15. We'll have one item after that. And we'll ask everyone who's on Zoom to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time so that should you wish to return, you don't have any technical difficulties that would arise if we have to remove you from the meeting. And we'll ask everybody to leave the public hearing room at this time.